Hello there, hello there, hello there. How the devil are we all? I am the sweatiest I've been in quite some time, let me tell you. There's no fucking way in this world the camera is on tonight. My nips are out, and all the rest of it. So it's just the screen for tonight, I think. Enjoy, feast your eyes upon this particular image. Do I condemn Keir Starmer? I do condemn Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is a terrorist outrage. Fact. And it's something of a shame that we haven't got the camera on, because I've got Peppa Pig stickers on my shirt. That I've just taken off, to be fair, but I have Peppa Pig stickers. I was looking after my niece this afternoon. It was delightful. Unfortunately, not in great circumstances. My little nephew has been a little bit sick, so they took him to the doctors, and so I got the pleasure of my little niece for a few hours. We went to the park. It was lovely. She still doesn't quite get the idea of football. She keeps wanting to pick the ball up and run away with it, which, like, I mean, rugby football is a type of football, but it isn't real football, is it? Let's be honest. And we went and got some Peppa Pig stuff, because she likes Peppa Pig. She's into crafting and such, so she wanted the stickers and the paper and stuff. That she gets that fucking nonsense from my mother, I think. The crafting nonsense. Yeah, so we had actually, I suppose I can just show you the fucking shirt. I don't have to put my nip-naps on screen, do I? Oof. Where are we? Boom. Hello. Look, I've got. There's a panda one, I think. Is that a panda or something? I'm gonna get closer. There's a panda one, and then there's a shiny pig one there. And apparently they're characters in the popular children's television show Peppa Pig, which my niece was very enthused about. We stuck some stickers on things, including she put stickers on me. She seemed very insistent on that. I'm not entirely sure why, but there we go. Yes. Who doesn't like Peppa Pig? Well, I don't really watch it other than occasionally when she's been around. But there you go. I was trying to ask her about the show, but her linguistic skills are not up to explaining the synopsis of television shows yet, which is, you know, skill issue. Anyway, but yeah, no, I've had a cracking afternoon. It's been lovely. Caught the sun a little bit, so I'm gonna have a nice tan. I might even pretend not to be white for a bit. That'll be nice. I'm joking. How old is your niece? About 15. No, she is coming up on 3 years of age now, nearly, I think, or something. I forget. I don't even know how old I am, really. After a while, age is just a fucking depressing reality of existence, isn't it? So I don't really know. Old enough that she'll probably watch me wither and die at some point. Fucking hell. Sorry. It's too hot. I've gone. My brain circuitry's gone. You'll have to take her to Peppa Pig World. Is that a thing? Is there a Peppa Pig World? I didn't even know that existed. What is the Mason-Dixon line? The border between the US and Canada, the first transcontinental railroad, or why are Luigi and Mario the thing? What? Okay, so someone's linked me to this. No, that's entirely the wrong thing. Oh, for fucking cockwomble sake! Why does it do this to me? Why, chat? Why? Boom. Right. So, like, it's obviously it's like a children's exam question, history exam, right? What is the Mason-Dixon line? 1, the border between US and Canada. 2, the first US transcontinental railroad. Or 3, boundary between free states and slave states before the Civil War. Technically, it's none of those things, in a very, very literal sense, because there were slave states north of the Mason-Dixon line. But let's not go into it. But what I want to know is, why the fuck are Mario and Luigi? Like, don't get me wrong, I know a significant proportion of both sides in the American Civil War were foreign-born troops, largely Irish and German, some Dutch, things like that. Italians tended to come over slightly later, but anyway. But why are Mario and Luigi the two characters? I don't know. But it is weird. It's weird that the intellectual property of the Nintendo Corporation have allowed Luigi to portray a slave fighter. But there you go. Brothers fighting brothers. Well, that is true. Is it actually established that Mario and Luigi are brothers? Or are they just plumbing workmates? Do we know? Is it like canon that they're actually brothers, or is that like a fan theory? Yeah, I don't know, but yes, they are brothers. Oh, okay, well there you go. I don't care. Oh, pardon me. Did a big burpee. Okay. Chat. Well, it's called Mario Brothers, but that, I mean, yeah, I guess it is called Mario Brothers, yeah. Luigi Mario and Mario. I don't think that's what it's called. I don't think that's their full name. I think you've lied to me there. What the fuck is this a whole thing? Is this fan art? Is this like a weird shitposty fan art thing or what? So, Mussolini... Hang on, this is the wrong way up. Sorry, 1 second. No, hang on. I'm doing the fucking joke whether you like it or not, dickheads. Boom. Right. Who was Mussolini? Was he an Italian wrestler, an Italian dictator, or an Italian sculptor? He was technically an Italian piñata, I think. Technically, at the end. That's the way I like to think of him. It's the way I remember him, very much so. Well, that and the fingering, of course. Anyway. Well, it was a branded history textbook. Oh, God. Oh, that's just fucking gross. This was an official thing from the 90s. Of course it was from the fucking 90s. The decade that Satan ruled. Or something, probably. I don't know. Whoever got that image, I'll serve them a cup of chalky milk. Oh, that's very nice, thank you. I'm like 60% sure there's one about 9/11 or Hitler. Why not combine the two? I don't know what kind of question would combine the two. Something about death tolls and Americans, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. If you wanted to help me out, chat, and you can, because I am fucking poor, especially having been banned from Twitch for a week for the crime of whatever the fuck it was. I've already forgotten. Anyway, yes, You can. Oh, gee, there is one. Okay, we'll get to it. You can do. I'll just before I get distracted. Okay. You can if you're on YouTube. No, if you're on twitch.tv/KevLogan1875. You can hit the follow button. You can subscribe. You can subscribe with Amazon Prime. If you've got Amazon Prime, you can link that to your Twitch account for free. And you get one free subscription every month, which you can use to impoverish Jeff Bezos one Twitch subscription at a time by subscribing to me with that free subscription. You can do it. You can also give subs to the community. You can, what else can you do? You can do bits messages. 200 bits or more will get you a text-to-speech. You can do super chats via the Streamlabs link below. $2 or more, they get you a text-to-speech. Oh, pardon me. It was heterophobia, yeah. I put in the thing, didn't I? And this is the last day where you were allowed to be gay, I think, in the entire year. Oh. You can help me out on Patreon and or PayPal. I've got a Discord, YouTube, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads. You can. Hitler did 9/11. No, he did not. He did do many bad things. He did not do 9/11 because, as we all know, Hassan Piker did 9/11. Why else would he say America deserved 9/11? He's trying to justify his own crimes before his inevitable date at the Hague. Him and BB will be in the dock, not necessarily together, but you know, at the same time, because they're both evil. Someone clip that. Fuck it. That's the beauty of shitposting. You're never sure whether the person's serious or not. Hey, turn left, you crazy mother flippers. How are you, turn left and the turn lefters on YouTube? How are you? I think I might be on with Curtis on Wednesday, possibly, if that's still happening. I haven't checked in, but maybe. Everyone go and follow Turn Left on YouTube. I don't think they do Twitch, even though I've been trying to poke them about it every time. But there you go. Yeah, you can subscribe to me, chat, if you wanted to, on the YouTubes. You can become a member for 99p. You can gift memberships to the community at that exact same price. Although you can't choose the person you give it to, so I can't even like prod people to be like, oh, gift Curtis a membership, because it's just random, because YouTube is shit. But there you go. There's still turning point lefts, yes. And what else can you do? Oh yeah, you can do super chats, which I will read out. And there was a Hitler one, not a Hitler super chat, I should point out. A Hitler thingamajig. In what year did Hitler take power? 1925, 1933, or 1944? Chat. I will give head to every person who gets this question right. Type 1, 2, or 3 in chat, and I will know if you googled. I see all things. Yeah, exactly. Matt, you just ruined it. Why have you typed it in chat? You're supposed to send me the message telepathically. Now everyone knows the answer. Everyone boo Matt in the Discord, in the Twitch chat, for ruining the game. Some people. Thank you for Googling, Mr. Giggles. Much love. You asked us a question, nerd. Yeah, but I didn't give you the specifics of like how to answer the question, did I? Jesus. Some fucking people, man. Unbelievable. Just ruin everything, don't they? That's why I am being a question Nazi, and whatever. Anyway, talking of fascists, the American government. What a segue. Yes, so we're going to be talking about a topic we've already talked about and focused on a little bit, because it's, for me, it's a sort of fascinating thing to see the rampant hypocrisy of the ruling class in the West. Yes, Bob Vylan, who people may not even be familiar with because they only came across everybody's radar over the weekend. They played at the Glastonbury Festival and rather stole the show with chants of Free Palestine, chants of death to the IDF. Again, I am not saying that. I'm quoting Bob Dylan. Not Bob Dylan, Jesus. Bob Vylan as having said that. Although Bob Dylan may wish to associate himself with those particular feelings, I don't know. And from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is another thing that they said. Live on BBC TV. And to say that it's rather kicked the hornet's nest of right-wing shittery is perfectly accurate. Because from the same government who sent over their vice president to the to Europe to fucking lecture us about free speech, they have taken the opportunity to see somebody else using their free speech and revoke the visa that they had for their upcoming American tour. The rationale for this, of course, is, as it says there, quote, "Foreigners who glorify violence and hatred are not welcome visitors in our country." This coming from the same government that has welcomed Benjamin Netanyahu, a man literally engaged in genocide, based entirely upon glorification of violence and hatred, to the White House several times. So there's that. You know, there's that. In more free speech news, where are we? Where is it? Did I not bookmark it? Anyway, Bob Vylan has been dropped by their management organisation. Specifically their talent organisation called United Talent Agency, which is at least in part run by this guy, who is a Zionist, Ken Firmaglich, which is apparently how you pronounce that. Anyway, Ken Firmaglich and his peeps have fired him. Now, also Andrew Neil, who started GB News as a free speech organisation, has been laughing about the US cutting down on free speech, because of course. And just to kind of put things into perspective as to the kind of silliness of all of this. This is the number 4 and 5 on the BBC's news website. 4. Bob Vylan coverage should have been pulled, says the BBC. And then 5, so less important apparently, Israel strike on Gaza seafront cafe kills at least 20 Palestinians, witnesses and rescuers say. So, in case you were wondering how little Palestinian lives matter to the British press, that's how little. They don't give a fuck. They couldn't care less. Anyway, on that point, you know who also was against Bob Vylan? Noted weather vane piece of shit, James O'Brien! Hey! Our old friend, the notorious J.O.B. As ever, not happy. Presumably more not happy with Bob Vylan for... or not happy with Kneecap specifically, for their chant of fuck Keir Starmer. Because if there's one thing you can't do, is attack Keir Starmer. Okay? in James O'Brien's eyes, you can do all sorts of things, but attacking Keir Starmer is just not cricket.
But I don't think that sunstroke or an unexpected rush of blood to the head could explain or excuse the comments that are dominating the news agenda today. Is it worth beginning with some observations that are largely true? Okay. BBC dropped an enormous clanger at the weekend. It is an epic editorial failure, almost so inevitable that you could have seen it coming from space. It strikes me that to decide not to broadcast Kneecap for reasons I probably don't need to explain, and to broadcast instead...
Well, you should have explained that, because why shouldn't they broadcast Kneecap? Why not, James? You've taken that as read, because you and all of your fucking rich posh friends have all agreed, apparently, that Kneecap are verboten, obviously. But could you maybe elucidate as to why you as a journalist think it's okay to censor certain opinions? Because you do seem to be of the opinion that it's absolutely fine that they did that, rather than it being a fucking national disgrace. But he won't, so we'll carry on.
Their sort of effective support act when a cursory glance at their Instagram account would reveal that they were perhaps, I would say, at least as likely to say or do something inflammatory and possibly criminal, means that somebody...
So, again, you have to go through each and every act and decide what their opinions, they're allowed or they're not. So you're literally advocating for the state broadcaster that we all have to pay for, taking millions of pounds of our money in the form of licence fees to buy the rights to broadcast Glastonbury, and then censoring certain political opinions, rather than showing things because they're of cultural worth, because they're being put on the stage. That's fine. You're absolutely fine with the BBC cancelling entire viewpoints, even though, just to bear this in mind, the majority of people agree broadly with Kneecap's position on Palestine. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand the way in which they go about their messaging can be inflammatory. The way in which Bob Vylan went about his messaging, or their messaging, I suppose there are two P's, was inflammatory. But the position broadly of free Palestine and fuck Israel is actually broadly supported across the country. And yet you think it's okay for the BBC to mollycoddle a genocidal regime at our expense. James, you're supposed to be a fucking journalist, mate. What's to stop them turning on you next? Because you've said some things about Palestine and Israel that I don't think the Israeli government like particularly. In fact, I'm pretty sure you have been accused by people who support the Israeli regime of being a terrorist sympathiser, of supporting Hamas, because you have said that the Israeli government have been murdering people and are wrong and should stop. You've been much more, let's say, respectable, because respectability politics is your politics. You've been much more respectable, much more adults in the room, much less student politics, much more sensibles, yeah, about your opposition to Israel. But you have been one of the few people, it has to be said, in British media who has openly criticised the Israeli regime, albeit very mildly, but you have. So what's to stop them from coming for you? Now that you and your friends in the media have decided that it's absolutely fine for the BBC to exclude Kneecap, and that they should have excluded Bob Vylan, what's to stop them coming for you? Now, you might say you work on LBC, but I think we know from LBC's record when it comes to Sangeeta Maiska that they are not adverse to targeting people with, let's say, advertiser-unfriendly views. Especially when it comes to Israel-Palestine. So what's to stop them coming for you, James? Have you read the poem all the way through? You know, the Niemöller poem? First they came for the communists, and I did not stand up because I was not a communist. Have you actually read that poem to the end? Because it doesn't end, and then they came for the Jews, and I did not stand up because I was not a Jew, and then everything worked out perfectly fine, and I, Pastor Martin Niemöller, lived a totally unmolested life, and Nazi Germany was awesome for us. No, it's they come for him, and there was no one left to stand up for him. It is both an allegory and indeed a true representation of an experience that he fucking had of originally being a supporter of the Nazis. Let us not fucking sugarcoat Mr. Niemöller, or Pastor Niemöller, and his record, right? He was originally a supporter of the Nazis who actually supported their early repression of fucking spoiler alert, you cunt. Dingus, you bastard. I'm trying to make a serious point here. Don't say very funny things. Anyway. A very true experience he had in Nazi Germany as an initial supporter. It was fine for them to go after the communists and political dissidents and all the rest of it. Actually didn't particularly mind when they started coming after Jewish people. But eventually realised, oh shit, I'm going to get chewed up by this. And realised that he was wrong the entire time. Not just because he himself became a victim of this, because partly he became a victim of it because he started speaking out. But it was, like I say, an allegory for solidarity. That in a society where the government and the powers that be want to stamp down on certain political opinions, you have to stand up against that, even if you don't necessarily fully agree with what the person is saying. Because ultimately, in protecting Kneecap and Bob Vylan from that censorship, you protect yourself from the inevitable purity spiral that happens once you allow censorious editorial practices to begin. I would advise you to go back and read the poem and really try and absorb its message.
Somebody should have been watching that in the way that Keith listens to this programme. Regular listeners may need an explainer here. So Keith listens to this programme, or at least he's supposed to, with his finger hovering like Billy the Kid's trigger.
Do you mean Keith as in Keir Starmer, or is that a part of your crew? Is this like an actual person who works there?
Finger over what we call the dump button. And that is not so much in case I say something out of order, although, but in case you do. And if you were to say something out of order, he hits the dump button, we lose a few seconds, go back a few seconds on the programme, and hopefully we avoid either causing enormous offence or committing an act of...
Well, to be fair though, James, there is rather a difference between you, who is doing a straightforward news and opinion show, and rock bands. Because I don't know if you know this, James, but rock bands have a tendency to be a little bit raucous, a little bit opinionated, a little bit shock value heavy. That's how rock bands have always been. Whether it's Elvis shaking his hips, or the Beatles saying that they're bigger than Jesus, or the Sex Pistols releasing God Save the Queen, which was a thing that described her as a fascist regime, no doubt. And it's very sad to see that Johnny Rotten has become something of a fucking monarchist piece of shite in recent times. But the point being that whether it's them doing that in the Jubilee year, or whether it's fucking Prince singing about eating pussy or whatever, right? Rock and roll artists of any variety, of any genre, have always done this. So if you are going to broadcast an event like Glastonbury, which is known for excessive drug taking, excessive drinking, and has hosted basically every controversial rock, pop, hip-hop act of the last 40 fucking years, you might hear some no-no words. And you go into it knowing that. There's no one flicking on fucking Glastonbury thinking it's going to be like songs of praise. You're going to maybe hear a dreadlocked man say the C word. You might see an Irishman in a fucking in a tricolor hat. Not hat. What's it called? Fuck's sake. Not a ski mask. Bollocks. Right. Whatever. Right. Just saying Chucky Allah or something of that nature. Not that that in of itself is necessarily controversial, but it can be seen as such. You're going to see Palestinian flags. You might see a scantily clad lady singing about fucking. You might see all kinds of things. It's a rock and roll event. Balaclava was the word I was looking for, fuck's sake. So the idea that that you can say, well, on this channel we take it very seriously. Well, yeah, of course you fucking do. You're not a rock and roll event, James. You are the furthest away from rock and roll I can possibly imagine. You are the biggest fucking briefcase slag I've ever fucking seen. Because you're even worse, because you're the guy who goes out and polishes the turds for the briefcase wankers. You're the one who shines the briefcase that gets carried by Keir Starmer. That's your role. Like, you're not rock and roll. What have you ever said that would be offensive, James? Are you capable of saying things that would be offensive? I don't know. At this point, you're so up your own arse that I don't know that you're capable of saying anything of worth, in all honesty. Let alone creating a cultural moment that will live through the ages. As, be under no illusion, now that the Avon and Somerset police are literally opening a criminal investigation into both Kneecap and Bob Vylan, the fact that there has been a statement in the House of Commons about this, which, trust me, we will be getting to, this is a moment that will live on in cultural infamy. In the same way that any number of other big cultural moments have. There will be few moments from any Glastonbury that have longer lasting impacts than what we saw over the weekend. Whereas you, James, could do an entire career of your respectability, sensibles, wank politics and be instantly forgotten. Because you don't say anything of worth. You're a shoe shiner for the powerful. A specific branch of the powerful. You're very much a Keir Starmer person, we understand that. You don't like Boris Johnson anymore, having voted for him to become the Mayor of London, of course. Exactly, he is captain of the sensibles. And the thing is, the sensibles don't get remembered. The mavericks get remembered. The mercurial, the creative, the interesting get remembered. You and your fucking respectable wank won't.
Of potential criminality, most obviously in the realms of sort of defamation, contempt of court and libel. So somebody should have been hovering over that button, like Keith hovers over the dump button. I appreciate that's a fairly unfortunate juxtaposition of mental imagery and language, but that is what it's called. And he hovers over it like a hawk for 3 hours every day. Barely takes time off to have a banana or a cup of tea.
Also, this is...
Get the fuck, Nick, I'm not playing with all these mutants!
Hello there, DJ Che. Welcome in, DJ Che and the DJ Chayers. You can hit the follow button if you so wish. This is the advantage of having a national broadcaster that isn't based on advertisement. Because one of the reasons that you, James, have a producer that hovers so willingly over the censorship button there is the fact that you don't want to lose advertisers. You are beholden to private outside entities rather than public good or just public interest. Because it would be very funny, James, if you came out and said, Benjamin Netanyahu's a
And
massive
sniff at the
cunt,
poop.
and I hope he dies. Like, that would be hilarious. That would be hilarious and would be remembered. But you're not capable of anything as interesting as that, I'm sure. But even if you were, it would be dumped, because that would be potentially offensive, or even potentially illegal. And so it would be dumped. Whereas the BBC aren't beholden to those outside financial interests, and can just show a cultural event. And now we know that they're happy to censor that cultural event. And you are happy about this. You think this is a positive. In fact, the only thing you are annoyed about is that they didn't censor enough of it. That's fascinating. On the same day that, again, to go back to this, on the same day that Israel blew up a fucking cafe in Palestine, killing 20 people, your big gripe is the BBC should have stopped Bob Vylan from saying hurty words. You're a wanker, mate. You're a fucking wanker. Where the fuck are your priorities?
Or check his socials, or all of the things that you might expect he'd be doing of a morning, instead of hovering at. So there is the first truth. The BBC have dropped an enormous clanger, and as is the way of such things, I predict that deputy heads will roll.
Almost certainly, but again, the BBC lay the foundations for their own destruction. They keep giving in to these right-wing wankers who wish to destroy the BBC. Oh, for God's sake. Who wish to destroy the BBC. He is a briefcase wanker, there's no doubt about it. They want to destroy the BBC because they see it as socialism, because they don't actually understand socialism, or the BBC, or life. But either way, they keep giving in and giving in and giving in, to the point where they'll happily fire Gary Lineker, but keep on a turf newsreader. And so the right wing will take over bit by bit and get rid of the BBC. They sow the seeds for their own destruction. Is there PMQs this week? There is indeed. It's Wednesday. And just after that, there are a couple of bills. And then the prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist group. Which, by the way, did you see this little beauty? Where are we? Here we go. Boom. No, hang on. That is not the right one. Where is it? Here we go. So this is the statutory implement. The prescribed organisations amendment to the Terrorism Act of the year 2000, the amendment, of course, of 2025, which lists the organisations they wish to prescribe. You have their Palestine Action. So on Wednesday, when this passes, you'll no longer be able to say, I support Palestine Action. You can still, for now, say, I support Palestine Action. It isn't illegal yet. But it's about to be. And I just want to mention the other groups that they're being prescribed alongside. They are very much the Jesus in between two criminals on the cross here. Because you have Maniacs Murder Cult, which is a far-right neo-Nazi organisation, originally based in the USA, but partly also based in Moldova, because why not, I guess, that, as it suggests, murdered people. Because they're neo-Nazis. They're neo-Nazis who murdered people. Just saying. And then you have the Russian Imperial Movement, which is a terrorist organisation which, as it suggests, is all about recreating the Russian Empire. So again, a far-right organisation, very much like Putin's little fucking bitch movement, all of that sort of thing. So, you know, there's that. And they felt that this was fine to add Palestine Action for putting some red paint.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Victory is ours.
Putting some red paint on privately owned planes. Yeah, we're a very sensible country here in the UK. Very, very sensible. Too sensible, some have suggested. maybe we need to be a bit more silly with it, you know. Honestly, fucking, this country's a shithole. It really is.
It's the period of time as well, you know, excusable. The first one that slips through, or the second one that slips.
Oh, thank you, Lord Fritos, for gifting a sub to DJ Che. Much love to you. Much love to you both. Epic people.
True, but to have it still up and to have it still broadcastable or watchable is inexcusable. That's an epic professional failure into which people will read whatever they want, but all you can say with certainty is that somebody in that chain of command, possibly somebody's plural, dropped an enormous clanger.
But James, you've already admitted that it's bad what Israel is doing, right? So why the fuck do you want that specific nation to be treated with kid gloves? Because I notice you haven't called for Stormzy to be cancelled for saying fuck the government and fuck Boris, which he did on stage at Glastonbury a few years ago. Do you remember? So you can say fuck the British government. You can even say fuck the American government, which again, several people did. You can say fuck Keir Starmer. You can say any number of things about basically any country on earth except Israel. Israel, you're not allowed to criticise, apparently. Otherwise, then the BBC are right to fucking censor you? What a load of shit! You're a fucking journalist, mate. Sort yourself out.
The second thing you can say, I would argue, and may have to this morning with absolute certainty, is that the character who called for death to the IDF is, and you remember that the language I can use on this programme is policed by Ofcom, is a pillock of the very, very first order.
James O'Brien, everyone. We've reached peak JOB. Like... James. Oh God, they can't stop, can they? They can't stop soy raging about this. They can't stop doing the exact thing that a punk band would want you to do. To see an establishment shill piece of trash like you, James, call him a pillock. Not even call him a wanker or something. Which again, as you point out, you can't say because you know your version of terms of service, right? The Ofcom regulations and all the rest of it. To call him a pillock. Honestly, if I were him, I'd just play that. I'd play you on a loop going, the guy's a pillock. Like a really cheap, shitty, posh knockoff version of Alan Partridge. Smell my cheese, you pillock. Like, you are that, James. Pillock. I put it to you that you are a cockwomble, Bob Vylan. Fucking pillock, man. Oh no, I've got some rude daubings on my car. It says cock pillock partridge. Unbelievable. Unfucking believable. James O'Brien is a dickhead. He's a dickhead. I don't know. He's just a dickhead. He's a pillock. Well, there's another thing you have in common with Tories, James. You think he's a pillock. Bravo.
And bear with me on this, because he may hold opinions that you are sympathetic to, but you can't call for the death of anybody from the stage of a public event.
Okay, I mean, lots of people have in the past. That isn't a new thing. That isn't remotely a new thing. The fucking BBC allowed Jeremy Clarkson to say he wanted striking unions to be executed in front of their families. Now again, I think he was joking. I think Jeremy Clarkson was being over the top and doing a joke, a very poor joke, but a joke nonetheless. And I don't think he should be censored for saying that. I think he should be fucking denounced because he's a garbage bag, but he's allowed to say it. So why is he allowed to say it? And Bob Vylan isn't. Also, he didn't technically call for the death of a single person at all. He said death to the IDF, which is an organisation. Now, it may be that Bob Vylan also wants every single member of the IDF to be killed. I don't know. That's entirely for them to explain themselves, should they so wish. But they said death to the IDF, which is an organisation. And you can say, like, if I say death to the BBC, you probably don't interpret that as I want every single employee of the BBC to be murdered. Because I'm attacking an institution. I'm attacking an organisation. I no longer wish that organisation to exist. Whereas if I say death to the X person, whoever, like the fucking Director General or something like that, then obviously that would be an actionable threat against a living person. And you know that, James. You must know that. You're not a stupid person. You're a twat, but you're not a stupid twat. You're just a twat. Yeah, I'm BBC sidle. Yeah. Yeah, no, I am BBC phobic.
Anybody being the operative point. There might be some wiggle room. Calling for the death of soldiers, you might think, is preferable to calling for the death of everybody from a certain ethnicity or religion or
Well, exactly, yeah. If you're in a war, like, nobody would have a problem with saying death to the Nazis, surely. And yet, you could make exactly the same argument, especially because of the shared love of human rights abuses between the IDF and the Nazis. The Nazis were, or the SS, for instance, was a legal part of the German armed forces. But if you say death to the SS, I don't think you'd have a problem, would you? Because you understand that it's not, the SS is not an ethnicity, nor is being a member of the Israeli Defense Forces is not an ethnicity or any kind of protected group. Come on now.
Team. And of course, I'd respond by pointing out that the IDF is made up of conscripts, largely. They have no choice, really, about being there.
Okay, and the Wehrmacht was made up of lots of conscripts too. And we not murdered, we killed lots of them.
Short of being imprisoned for objection, but they are also human beings, and calling for the death of soldiers who are...
Which again, technically he didn't fucking do, so stop lying.
Quite possibly following orders that you find repugnant is a stupid and dangerous thing to do.
Oh, it's okay, they're just following orders, it's fine then, okay, cool.
Briefly into the realm of opinion rather than listing truths, then they set back the cause in many ways.
Oh, thank fuck, we've got James O'Brien on chat, everyone. Thankfully, the knower of all things, the man who is literally going to lead Palestinian liberation, James O'Brien. James O'Brien is knows how to progress the cause of Palestinian freedom by supporting Keir Starmer, a man literally aiding and abetting the murderer in this situation, that being the Israeli government. Yeah, no, you, Bob Vylan, are not just a pillock, you are holding back the cause of Palestine. What you need to do is work from the inside, you see. What you need to do is work from the inside, by which I mean become a posh twat on the radio, give milquetoast pushback against Israel, and then actively support the people arming, funding and supporting the murderers of Palestinians. That's how you bring about Palestinian freedom, my friend. There's no sensibles approach to this, James. There's no sensibles, adults in the room, nicey, respectability politics answer to this situation. Because it's precisely that adults in the room bullshit that got us to this situation in the first place. Incrementalism is sexy. Fucking true, Carpe. By the way, everyone go follow Carpe Pax, who is centrism personified. I'm joking. They're fucking cool. Everyone go and follow Carpe. Are you suggesting James O'Brien doesn't think about the liberation of Palestine every day? I'm suggesting James O'Brien couldn't give less of a fuck about Palestinian liberation. He's a tone policing, respectability politics, briefcase twat. He is a minge.
Ways, because the kind of people who would have described everybody on a Palestinian protest march as supporting terrorism are rubbing their hands with glee at this kind of thing. This is where we move in.
They don't seem to be. They seem to be losing their fucking mind, James. Because they just saw the most powerful cultural moment in recent British history, and it was everybody singing Free Palestine, Death to the IDF, and From the River to the Sea, and fuck Keir Starmer. That's what they saw. The Zionists saw their biggest cultural defeat in recent British history and are freaking the fuck out. They are losing their fucking minds. They are pulling out every single stop they can to ensure that the BBC shuts all this shit down, that Kneecap and Bob Vylan are not allowed to play anywhere ever again. They're pulling out every stop they can to destroy freedom of expression in this country because they know they've lost the fucking battle. Because just like every other battle that where someone else can fight back, Israel always loses. When it's a kid throwing a stone against a tank, they're fine. Oh, they can bomb hospitals, they can fucking set kids on fire, they can destroy families and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. But any time they come up against an army that can fight back, be it a cultural army or an actual army, they lose. Because they're just nasty little crybully shitheads who hide behind America. They just saw the youth of Britain completely reject everything they've worked hard to try and ram down everyone's throat. They're not rubbing their hands with glee, they're fucking terrified. They can see the loss of the cultural battle. And I think a lot of Zionists will look back on Benjamin Netanyahu as not the person who won for Zionism, but the person who started the ball rolling on the loss for Zionism. Because for his own selfish reasons, he has imperiled the Greater Israel Project. The Greater Israel Project was chugging along very nicely. It might have taken another century or two, but they were getting there. They were swallowing up little parcels of land. A Golan Heights here, a couple of settlements there, just bit by bit picking off the land they needed to expand and expand and expand. Whereas he's gone like fucking full Leroy Jenkins on this shit so that the war never ends, so that he doesn't have to go to jail, and woken the world up to the genocidal slaughter that they've been engaging in for 80 fucking years. The generation of people that were singing Death, Death to the IDF, and again, that's what they were singing, are the political leaders of tomorrow, are the taxpayers of tomorrow. And they're not going to put up with that money being sent to Israel to continue the fucking bombing and killing of Palestinians. And the Zionists have got nothing but themselves to blame for allowing and aiding and abetting Benjamin Netanyahu to do this. The stupid bastards. Leroy Jenkins did have chicken. God bless him. Actually, I shouldn't say that because I don't know. He could be an evil racist or something. I don't know who the fuck Leroy Jenkins actually is. Not a clue. Thank you, Scally Bubble, for 20 gifted memberships. Much love to you, friend. I'll wait for the first alert to go off, and then I'll mute the alert button so that we don't have to listen to the noise alert 20 times, because that is it going to play at all? Maybe it isn't. Okay. Well, apparently the alert box isn't even fucking working then. Brilliant. Thanks, alert box, you prick.
Into the realms of being able to hold two opinions in your head at the same time. So hideous humans, whose death I would never ever call for, either publicly or privately. Hideous humans.
You wouldn't even do it privately, you minge. What an absolute fucking fanny you are, by the way. Even in the privacy of your own home. You little fuck. I wouldn't even be interesting when there would be low legal ramifications for me to do so. I wouldn't even be cool when I wouldn't face any consequences for it. You fucking prick. It did work when DJ Che raided. I don't know then. The fucking alerts are bollocks then. I don't fucking know. But either way, thank you, Scully Bubble. Much love to you.
Who've tried from the very start to conflate support for the civilians in Gaza, support for the Palestinian people, are rubbing their hands with glee today at the prospect of some. It doesn't matter that you've never heard of him before, but they're rubbing their hands with glee today at the fact that one of their enemies has engaged in precisely the same conflation. So
James, you don't have clean hands on this, my friend. You are the same person who used these exact same tactics against Jeremy Corbyn. You are literally the guy who said that under Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party had become the party of Holocaust denial. You are the propagandist that you now warn us about. Incorrectly, by the way. I don't think this is remotely the reaction that I've seen from Zionists on this. But regardless, you are the person who was happy to smear allegations of anti-Semitism against innocent people. You're a propagandist hack. I don't trust you for a fucking second.
So you can disapprove on an enormous scale of what the IDF is doing, and this morning, as you are almost certainly not aware, Israel has ordered evacuations in northern Gaza, so people who have already been shifted from pillar to post countless times have been shifted once again from the latest pillar to the latest post. We think that 23...
But don't say anything bad against the people who are shifting them from pillar to post, otherwise you'll be a pillock from pillar to post.
People were killed on Sunday alone, so you could probably put the number of people killed since Bob Vylan undertook their set at Glastonbury in, I'd say, close to triple figures. 85 is the number that I've been able to conjure up or calculate.
I noticed that you haven't called the leaders of the IDF pillocks. Or anything bad at all. You have pointed out that they've murdered 85 people, that is true. Although you did say killed rather than murdered, so that's interesting. James, your focus on Bob Vylan, or Kneecap or whoever, and your lack of focus on the fact that the IDF is slaughtering people, is telling. Mentioning in passing that people have been killed as a way of saying, Bob Vylan, you're making it less likely that we can stop this, is really disgusting.
So ask yourself this, which is the direction in which we're moving. How do we end up talking more about one thing than the other? And I'm guilty of that as well, which is part of the reason why I'm so keen to ask the question. Other things that I think are, some things that are true. Many expert observers consider Israel's actions to have crossed the threshold for genocide. It is almost...
And you're too much of a pussy to add your name to that, apparently. You'll say, many people have considered the thing and they think it might be genocide, possibly, who knows. But you're too much of a fucking mingebag to say it yourself. You melt. You fucking googly-eyed mutant.
Impossible to argue that they haven't committed war crimes, and there is no definition of ethnic cleansing, for example, that doesn't fit precisely the policies they have pursued in Gaza. The occupations in the West Bank are and remain completely illegal. The violence visited upon people who are living or trying to live peaceful lives on their land by illegal settlers is hideous and incessant and egregious and all of those things. What else can we put on the...
You're starting to sound a little bit Hamas, James, if you don't mind me saying. Starting to sound a little bit anti-Semitism-o. You're starting, dare I say, to sound a little bit like Jumbly Crumblins. A little bit Hitlerino, yeah?
The list of things that's true. I don't know if you're aware of this. The BBC defended a comedian's comments about Jeremy Corbyn a few years ago, after he said, or effectively said, that if you were to drop a bomb on Glastonbury, you'd be able to get him, because he was there at the time, and all of his fans as well. This is a comedian called Finn Taylor, who compared the former Labour leader to Bob Dylan and said, I only hate him so much because of his fans. People think that Bob Dylan's the greatest musician that ever lived, and you listen to some of it and it's awful, but then people are so dogmatic and say he's the greatest musician. People who like Corbyn, it's 200,000 people in the Labour Party that are fanatics, so all you've got to do next year is bomb Glastonbury. Hopefully Dylan's headlining two birds, one stone.
Get some help.
In much the same way that when Joe Brand joked about battery acid and milkshakes, nobody took her seriously, nobody took him seriously, and unless there is a large crowd of people on the streets of Somerset who are currently toe-to-toe with members of the Israeli Defence Force, then some ludicrous parallels that I've seen this morning with the case of Lucy Connolly, who of course called for a pogrom against refugees and asylum seekers in state-funded accommodation, are among the stupidest things I've seen in public discourse, and I wouldn't even give them the time of day if they hadn't appeared on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, my late father's old newspaper. So if there is a rampaging mob of people poised to murder human beings and you offer them encouragement and support, your action is on a different planet entirely from somebody inciting violence against people on the other side of the world whom your audience is never likely to encounter or meet. I can't believe I need to explain that. I'm not even sure that I do, because anybody who doesn't understand is probably lying or pretending, but I'm happy to get that out there as well.
On that point, I don't know if you saw, where was it? There was, I think was it Elon Levy who said something along the lines of, oh, this dickhead wouldn't last 5 minutes with a member of the IDF, blah, 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 or something like that. And I just, I thought I had it bookmarked, maybe he took it down. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, I mean, does the IDF have some sort of reputation for murdering innocent, unarmed civilians or something? That's interesting, isn't it? Thank you, Baron von Cockslap, with 6 months, who says, John B. Crumblins, indeed. Indeed. And thank you, Kimberly Diamond 1971, for resubscribing with Prime. 34 months, that is far too much. Please seek better streams, frankly. And we're on a hype train. If we get to level 2 of the hype train, I will finger James O'Brien's integrity, because it is fucking dead. And thank you, Mellow Maggot, for 5 memberships on the YouTube. Much fucking love to ya! Not that this is relevant to anything, but did you see T-Pain covering Black Sabbath's War Pigs? Amazing shit.
Generals gathered and bled masses, just like witches said, black masters. Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death construction. In the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Lord, Lord. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah.
Fucking dopeness. Love it.
So all of those things are true. Bob Vylan's comments on the stage were all of the things that his critics have described them. It was appalling hate speech. It was obnoxious and insightful.
Just some random numbers. Job is an idiot. Oh, kitty bonk.
Well, yeah, random number 1312. I don't know what you can possibly mean by that. That's crazy talk. Did I scroll past it? I don't think I did scroll past it. Did I? No, I didn't scroll past it. Shut up. Fucking telling me stuff in chat that's wrong. Thank you, Wayward Historian. We're on level 2 of the hype train. I've got to go to London for no particular reason. Yes.
It was arguably anti-Semitic because there won't be many non-Jews in the
Whoa,
Israeli...
Whoa. James. What was this conflation you were talking about 2 seconds ago? What was that? Oh, it's anti-Semitic. Well, as propagandists for the Israeli military and government like to point out very regularly, there are like 4 Arabs and a Christian in there. So how the fuck is it anti-Semitic, you prick? Not all people in the IDF are Jewish, and not all Jews are in the IDF. Ergo, not anti-Semitic. You prick. God, you're a fucking hack.
Defence force, but there will be some. And of course, the distinction, the hair that you might want to split between calling for death to all Muslims or death to all Jews and death to members of an army, death to actual combatants, is for me probably pertinent, but not particularly.
Brilliant. Way to go. I hope the splinters in your arse become infected, because you've sat on that fucking fence so deliciously.
So why? Why are we like the way we are? Why are we like this? Humans. All of us. Let me read you this from David.
No, why are you like this, you cunt?
Please, can you talk about what is happening in Gaza? What I heard over the weekend was horrific. Starving children, innocent Palestinians being used for target practice and being shot at while they queue for food. Aid stations being set up in places that are deliberately designed to be hard to get to. This is what David believes he has seen.
What do you mean? Whoa! What, James? What do you mean believes he has seen? We've all fucking seen it. We've all seen it. I had a genuinely horrific moment today, and I know I'm not the story here. I know, but I'm just telling you a thing, right? So I was just before I went to pick up my niece, which I mentioned earlier. I looked after my niece this afternoon, and so just before I went to pick her up, I was sort of idly scrolling through social media and saw a video of a young lad, probably not much older than my niece, bleeding out. The doctors were doing what they could. I don't know if the person survived. It was too horrific. I had to switch it off because I had to try and get myself mentally prepared to look after a 3-year-old. I didn't want to watch a video of a 3-year-old, or probably about a 5-year-old, whatever, dying. A Palestinian that had been murdered by the IDF. The group that you are so diligently running liberal fucking interference for, James. And it messes you up. We've all seen this, James. This isn't, oh, he thinks he saw it. No, he saw it. You saw it. I fucking saw it. We've all seen the slaughter. It's been 20 fucking months. Well, it's been 80 years. But specifically since October the 7th, 2023, it's been 20 fucking months. We've all seen this, James. We've seen the genocide. Day after day after fucking day. And you have to couch it in this stupid fucking language because you're too afraid to take any actual opinion. The adults in the room are too fucking scared to dare stand up to Benjamin Netanyahu or Donald Trump. You fucking sad bastards. Honestly, when all this is said and done, hopefully the Palestinian people will still exist in some form, although who fucking knows. But when all this is said and done, and we look back on this in the same way that we look back on the Rwandan genocide, or the Srebrenica, or fucking the Holocaust, or whatever, pick your genocides throughout history, the Armenian, the Aboriginals of Australia, the native peoples of the North American plains, whatever. When we look back on this in history, the greatest villains will of course be people like Benjamin Netanyahu and basically every fucking American president of the latter half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. But I think a special place should be made for liberal defenders of this, who soft-soaked, soft-pedalled, minor opposition to Israel so that they could essentially play liberal defence for this genocide. They're not the people that would be in the Nuremberg trials of this genocide. Not that any such fucking trials will ever take place, but they're not the worst people in all of this. But I don't think they should be forgotten in all of this. I think room needs to be made to remember wankers like James O'Brien and other fucking members of the Commentariat in London and Washington and New York and all over the world, who did the kind of soft end, the thin end of the wedge of the Hasbro bullshit. And this is undoubtedly Hasbro bullshit. Anyone who thinks that what Bob Vylan said on that stage is like anti-Semitic is engaged in the same bullshit as the fucking the Mossad accounts on Twitter, pumping out the same bullshit day after day after day. That's who. This, you're doing the same fucking job. Well, Sheila Fogarty and people like her, other people on this station, I think fall more into the realms of the harder defenders of Israel. I don't even think they count as the liberal defenders of genocide at this point. They're just defenders of genocide.
Draw out and displace the Palestinians even more. It's appalling. It needs to be stopped. There are also reports that some soldiers are receiving orders to kill. It's not being spoken about enough. The BBC has recently...
Wow. So if they're being ordered to kill, surely wishing for them to get a taste of their own medicine in the form of, say, I don't know, I mean, I can only quote Bob Vylan on this, death to the idea was, a phrase he used. Surely that wouldn't be too bad. Surely calling for the Palestinian people to defend themselves against direct shoot-to-kill murder orders actually isn't the horrific crime that you claim it is.
Stop it. Get some help.
I think he should. Oh my god. Can you... Okay, last one now, okay? I'm not doing any more of these fucking stupid Mario and Luigi fucking questions from the 90s. Who was Rosa Parks? An African-American civil rights advocate, a famous actress, or an opera singer? This is a difficult one. Could be any. Could be anything, couldn't it? We don't know. We simply don't have all the information available to us, I think, at this point, to really tell. Thank you, Main Captain, for resubscribing with Prime. 52 months. Absolute ledge. Let's go.
Refused to air a documentary that addresses some of these issues. Fortunately, Channel 4 will be showing it, so I will watch it there. And I do. I think probably more than anywhere else except Channel 4. We talk about the plight of the Palestinian people in Gaza on this programme repeatedly and regularly. We can't do it.
But you'll do it from the perspective of tut, and then you support Keir Starmer and the Labour government who are doing this. You will regularly talk favourably about David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, who is aiding and abetting this. You smeared as anti-Semitic the one leader who wanted to do anything to try and stop Israel. You're part of the problem, James.
Every day. And we have already done it today. The idea of conducting a conversation about what happened in Glastonbury this weekend without talking about Gaza would be a bit like trying to have a conversation about cake without talking about flour or eggs or butter or icing. But it doesn't defend...
Did he say ISIS?
And possibly even explain the actions of this character you had never, ever heard of before. I'd have a quick look at some of the people who are having a swing. I wonder if you can predict what position they'll be coming from. So you can't ever insult the IDF because they're all Jewish. Nice get-out-of-jail-free card, give your head a wobble, mate. No, of course you can insult their actions. You can critique their actions, mate.
But you can't actually, do anything about it. Ever. But you can write a strongly worded letter of condemnation.
You can't call for them all to be killed.
Which you didn't do.
And if you listen to the words that I actually said, some people will seek to describe and define it as an anti-Semitic action. I am not actually one of them.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. You're not the one saying that. Somebody else is saying that. You're a fucking coward, James O'Brien. You are a, dare I say, morally bankrupt serial liar, to quote you. You're such a coward that you won't even stand on the positions you hold. But you will elucidate a generic opinion that somebody else has, unchallenged. Yeah, you're a fucking coward, mate.
Which is why I'm talking about why the enemies of the Palestinian people will be rubbing their hands with glee today.
But Keir Starmer is one of the enemies of the people of Palestine. And you fucking support him. You support the people who are the enemies of Palestine. You, James O'Brien. You, the sensibles. You, the adults in the room, continuing to sell them weapons.
Day, and you're proving my point for me, mate. Perhaps your head is the one most in need of a wobble, because this gives enormous succour and ammunition to the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, the Suella Bravermans of this world, who are desperate to claim that everybody who wants innocent Palestinians to stop being killed is somehow supportive of Hamas or possessed of murderous bloodlust towards all Israelis, or on this occasion, just the soldiers. Didn't stop the Daily Mail.
Yeah, just the soldiers. Look, if you're soldiers, sometimes you get killed. That happens. James, there was a British IDF soldier this week that was killed in the line of action. I don't know if you saw that, James. Where was it? Come on now. Come on. There we go. British-Israeli soldier killed while fighting in Gaza. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know who this KF Logan 1875 is, whoever he is, but that is a very, very insensitive gif to put up of that story. I mean, honestly, he might be Hamas, this guy, I don't know who he is. But whoever he is, he's a wrong un. Clearly anti-Semitic, and clearly has a bloodlust. Have we checked he doesn't have tunnels under his house? He probably does, I reckon.
And this is a very pertinent point. It didn't stop the Daily Mail from describing it as a death to Israelis chance, whereas whether you consider it to be hair-splitting or not, it was death to Israeli soldiers that this...
Well, it wasn't even that, it was death to the IDF, which contains soldiers, but also contains, like, air forces and things, doesn't it? Isn't it a rather more generic thing than just soldiers?
I'll use the word once more. This Pillock was calling for.
Ooh, Pillock! Oh, Pillock!
10:16 is the time. So, why do we find it so much easier to talk about this than we do to talk about what's actually happening in Gaza?
Because you're a hack.
And to make it easier for you this morning, I'm going to include myself in that category. I sometimes at the weekend hear a story, stumble across a story, get hit over the head with a story and think, well, that's my 10 o'clock on Monday taken care of. And it's not. I mean, it's very much a first world problem, but, you know, the thought of turning up for work and not being able to find anything that we might find engaging together is, well, it focuses the mind somewhat, shall we say. So it's nice, for want of a better word, to encounter over the course of the weekend or the afternoon and evening on a weekday, something that I think will lend itself to our time together the following morning. And there is a little bit of that. You go and I think to yourself, oh, that's interesting. I better start marshalling my thoughts on this one because we will probably be talking about it tomorrow.
You really should have done that then.
Which doesn't hold true for the latest killings in Gaza. That is a much harder mountain to climb. You have to work. I'm not asking for sympathy, God forbid, but it is not least because of the kind of messages that I feel I have a duty to look at least, rather than ignore. But the difficulty of having a nuanced, informed conversation when you've got people on one side claiming that you're a tool for the Israeli regime and under the others claiming that you're one of the biggest anti-Semites in history is.
Well, you would think, James, that given that you've just told us there about the blight on your life that is being smeared incorrectly as an anti-Semite, would lend itself to you in the way that you would then be very careful about levelling accusations of anti-Semitism against others for fear of committing that very same offence yourself. And yet you do it so easily and so regularly. Jeremy Corbyn sends his fucking regards.
I think there'd be something wrong with you if that washed off your back. Even if it's all Horlicks, there'd be something wrong with you if it washed off your back completely. So why do we find it so much easier to talk about an idiot at Glastonbury saying something stupid than we do about what is happening in Gaza? 0345 60 973. Why?
Well, one of the problems is that Israel's been doing it for so long now that people are sort of bored of it. Sounds disgusting, but it's true nonetheless. Lots of people in the West get compassion fatigue, or whatever you want to call it. You'll notice that Ukraine doesn't get talked about a lot anymore, does it? Because it's been going on for 3 fucking years. There's only so much you can really say. The Israelis have been engaged in this genocide so thoroughly, and yet nothing is being done about it, that people run out of energy to do anything meaningful with the topic. What do you say? You can only bang your head against the wall so many times before you've realised, like, what can I do here? What more can be said than we are engaged in active collusion with a genocidal regime? And the British government absolutely is that. And yet nothing changes. I mean, one could be silly about this and say, James, you should take the same approach to Bob Vylan that the British government take towards the Israeli government. And just say, you should call on Bob Vylan for restraint. And then Bob Vylan won't show restraint, but will investigate themselves, find out they did nothing wrong, get $1 billion from America, and carry on doing exactly what they were doing anyway. Because that's how it works, right?
What is it? And I'm looking for psychology. I'm looking for personal as well as political observations. I am guilty. I can't sit here and say, why have they put this on the front page when they haven't put the latest deaths in aid queues? Because I know why they haven't.
Can we have some levity? Do you have levity? I don't have levity. I apologise. Actually, what we can do, because we've been going like an hour and a half already, what we can do, because like I was going to watch this thing in Parliament about the Glastonbury thing, but like, does it actually matter? Not really. So there was a fun... Oh no, hang on, that's the wrong thing entirely. There was a fun thing that we could maybe take a look at, which is a little bit more silly, perhaps. Don't worry, we'll do the rest of the James O'Brien clip first, but then we might take a look at a video about YouTube history. YouTube medievalists are weird. Metatron, Lindy Beige and Shadiversity. No, Shadiversity even. That could be quite fun, maybe.
I know in my bones why they haven't. It's the same reason why my ears prick up when I see a story like this Bob Vylan story in a way that they don't when I hear another tale, when I see another statistic about innocent people in Palestine being murdered. So I'm happy to keep explaining why this character has done immeasurable harm to the cause of pro-Palestinian.
Yeah, you should have just incrementally done the thing that I've done, and then changed nothing positively for the Palestinian people. Shut the fuck up, James. You are literally the thin end of the genocidal wedge, mate.
People in this country, but what I want you to tell me is why you think we find it so much easier, so much more inviting, so much more pleasant somehow to get stuck into this story.
Well, hang on, James. When you use the word pleasant, it's very obvious. Because it's not very pleasant to talk about children being exploded. And whilst it's not necessarily pleasant to talk about some gig at Glastonbury or whatever, which may may tickle your fancy or may not, it's clearly way less horrific than slaughtered baby news. That's actually why.
Of outrageous comments and carefully cultivated outrage in response than we do about the reality of what is, by most or by many accounts now, probably a genocide and certainly a series of war crimes. Why? How can people profess to be more offended by an idiot rapper shouting bilge from the stage in Somerset than they are by...
Shouting bilge from... You briefcase prick.
...the continuing carnage in Gaza? It's extraordinary when you stop to think about it, right? But I'm guilty as well. I think that the situation in Gaza is 17 million times worse than anything that happened at Glastonbury over the weekend. But as a radio phone-in host, I'm probably at the apex of the process that I'm seeking to analyse today. Why do we find it so much easier to do this than we do to do that?
To somewhat misquote Bob Vylan, you say you want the adults in the room back. Shut the fuck up. Medievalists.
When I was younger, like most teenagers who were into fantasy and history, I was also into medieval history, because it had knights and swords and all that cool stuff. I read the Jan-Guillou Arn series as a kid, and later in life read James Clavell's Shogun. In my teenage years, I played Shogun 2 Total War and Crusader Kings 2. I'm sure this kind of thing tracks for many of you as well. In terms of actually learning about this stuff, I didn't really have much of an idea where to start. Enter youtube.com. The early algorithm and my more
Oh wow, look at the old layout. Woo!
And HEMA-obsessed friends very quickly started serving me videos from seemingly knowledgeable individuals talking directly into a camera and
Oh god, fucking Metatron. Oh, what a wanker.
occasionally showing off their swords. Then
And Shad. Who's more fash out of Shad and Metatron? Probably Shad, right?
I began my undergraduate studies and started learning more not just about history but also about how history is written, I started getting bored with these videos, verging on actively disliking some of them. I started noticing that a lot of the channels often relied heavily on rationalization and logic, not on evidence or sources. This is a phenomenon that I observe with a lot of reenactment content on YouTube. They sometimes use primary source materials as a jumping off point, but from there...
Yeah, Lindy Beige is pretty cringe as well. But I think the other two are like actively fashoids. Which, Lindy Beige is bad, but I don't think he's that bad.
Then on begin to rationalize how, quote, things worked back then based on their own personal experience. You might hear them say something like, if they did X, then Y would happen. That doesn't make much sense, so they probably did Z. It's all argumentation and deduction based on what they believe, their preconceived notions, and their experiences. This approach to history can very quickly become problematic for many different reasons, but with these YouTubers I think something unique starts to happen. When the so-called history that they teach doesn't have to be backed up or justified by its connection to the sources, and when their personal experience takes primacy, then they start to believe themselves to be far more knowledgeable and qualified than they actually are. They begin to quote-unquote reason themselves towards every answer. And for some reason, the end result of this development almost always looks like an hour-long video essay about why women don't belong in video games. The plan here is to revisit 3 channels that I watched something like a decade ago, those being Lindy Beige, Metatron, and Shadiversity, to see...
It's mad, because Metatron's been around for so long, and yet I didn't know much about them until relatively recently. I think it was until 255 started mentioning them or whatever, and forcing me to watch that shite.
where they are now and try to figure out what's going on with them. When I'm not bogged down in research for one of these videos, you might think I'm doing something otherwise intellectually stimulating. You would be wrong. I'm watching British reality TV. The other day I was going to watch Come Dine With Me with my girlfriend. If you're not familiar, 4 people each take turns inviting the others to their home for a meal. They rate their experiences and whoever scores highest gets £1,000 cash. The kicker is that the producers almost always make sure one of the 4 people is insane, and they have a colossal crash out by the end of the week. Come Dine With Me and other British reality shows are readily available on YouTube for people in Britain, but I'm in Norway. That's where Surfshark comes in.
Oh no, he did me. I was thinking for a second it might not be an advert, but it was. Of course it was.
Back to the medievalists. First up, Metatron. Luckily, he has provided us with a perfect Rorschach test to figure out his politics and understanding of history.
Was Nazism left-wing or right-wing? This question is a form of ahistorical syllogism. In my opinion, there are 2 major problems here. One, they use the American left-right dichotomy or political spectrum, and they forcefully apply it to historical European.
Oh, did I find Metatron on my own? Was it? Oh, I don't know. 255. I've lost the will to live.
Political regimes and ideologies. 2, they use 21st century political spectra and juxtapose them over 20th century politics.
The core of his issue in regards to this is a phenomenon called presentism, though he doesn't use that word because it's a word an actual historian would use. Instead, he calls it an ahistorical syllogism. Presentism is a complicated subject, and there's varying definitions and ways to use the term. But one use of the term is to describe the way...
Hang on, I remember now. I did find him on my own. He did that video about... Do you remember there was a short video the BBC produced about, like, oh, there were black people in ancient Rome or whatever, and he went mental about it because no, there can only be white people in ancient Rome. That thing, wasn't it? Yeah, no, I did find that guy. Fair enough.
Way in which the present exerts pressure on the historian's construction.
No, I already knew about Shad and Lindy before. I just didn't watch them because I thought they were boring.
Of the past. You are continually being shaped and reshaped by what you experience and by the society around you. This can push and pull you towards...
Actually, Andrina, I'm going to have to pull you up on a historical thing here. The left-right thing is not from the German parliament at all. It's actually from the French Revolutionary Parliament. Those that would sit on the left side were known as leftists, and those on the right were the right wing of the party. And there was on the left there was a thing called the Montagnards, which is the mountaineers, because they sit up in the balcony on the left side of the thing. So actually you're wrong. It's about France and not Germany. So actually,
interests, approaches, and methods which can influence or shape the ways in which you approach history. The sources, the so-called facts that you observe, are all the same, but the angle that you approach them at, the facts you decide that are relevant to the history and the ones that aren't, are all things influenced by who you are. The issue about this complaint about history that wants to put the historian outside of the historian's context is that it essentially wishes for a history without the historian. You're asking for an analysis of history that stands apart not just from the historian, but also from the time in which the analysis is being conducted. A history that exists as an objective and true story to be simply uncovered, untainted by interpretation. This is impossible to accomplish. History has to fit into modern understandings of the world, and this, alongside many other things, of course, might be a...
And actually, there's a fascinating part of the study of history, which is historiography, which is essentially the history of history, so to speak, which is essentially a history of people filtering historical events and their interpretations through the understanding of their own day. And I think a really great example of that is the American Civil War. Because it happened a long time ago, and it happened in a time when you've had mass communication for the entire period, right? So the initial sort of histories of the American Revolution start off as essentially reuniting histories. So they emphasize things like the nation coming together, and they question the degree to which this was a war that even really should have happened, because they weren't even that separate, because America is one big country and blah blah blah, which of course was one of the big things of the Reconstruction / Redeemer era, is that they were trying to bring the country back together, and the history sort of reveals that. The history sort of tells you all of that. You then have later on, during the kind of robber baron era, and even further into the era of the Great Crash and the sort of crisis of capitalism and stuff like that, you have a lot more economic history. So a lot of historians write about the American Civil War from the economic point of view, to the point where slavery sometimes gets completely overlooked as a system of morality, and it's just looked at as entirely an economic question, right? And so you start getting that history starts to sort of take over and become the big thing. It's you know, it's that. Then you get more social history as you move into the era of black emancipation. So you have the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, and people start to look at it through that perspective. You then have the kind of Vietnam War era and the kind of hippie era into the late 60s into the 70s, where you start to get a lot more of this what's called good war or necessary war history. So people start looking at the perspective of, was this war a moral war? Was it a legal war? Was it a war that needed to be fought? Was it inevitable? Was it a thing that that could have been avoided and should have been avoided? Because they're filtering it through their own experience of the Vietnam War, and indeed before that even sort of the Korean War. And all of that. And again, you get a sort of resurgence of that type of history around the American Civil War during the early 2000s and mid-2000s because of the Iraq War and because of Afghanistan and things like that. Yeah, so you have that, and Lost Cause history, of course, but I'm talking about actual proper history. Lost Cause isn't fucking history. The Lost Cause narrative has been throughout for the last 150 years, and will continue probably for the next 150 years, although hopefully ever receding, because it's not real history, it's a fucking load of shit.
Point where me and Metatron fundamentally disagree, but I don't actually think so, and I'll explain why later on. To close off this point about history being a conduit between the past
Yeah, John, the idea of Tick being a good historian is rather laughable.
and the present, let me quote American historian Ha-Seok Chang. Quote, "Even though history is about the past, history writing is for those who are living in the present. Even if you could climb into Aristotle's head, as Kuhn was fond of recommending, how would you know how to navigate inside it? And if you somehow really succeed in thinking and talking..."
Well, no, Herodotus was thought to be the kind of first historian rather than historiographer, but yeah. I suppose if history starts in a place, then historiography starts in that same place. So, yeah. Although I'm reminded of the story of the historian who was asked about where did this all start, and he said sarcastically, well, probably with Herodotus. And the journalist that asked him the question went, "Oh, that's cool. Have you got his number?"
talking just like Aristotle and his contemporaries, how would you come back and tell the rest of us what you've learned? If you could truly attain this ideal of historiography, you would be Aristotle, and we would need other historians to decipher for the rest of us what you're saying. The completely faithful history, if one could achieve it, might just be the past itself. Like Borges's perfect map that is just the terrain itself, and therefore completely useless. He proposes the following slogan, quote, "Like funerals, history writing is for the living." The analogy to the map is a really good one. Imagine a perfect recreation of the past. Everyone would be left to sift through all the data points themselves, and to draw their own conclusions. We would have all the information available to us, and we would know and understand none of it.
Expecting therefore 21st century American political ideas to overlap neatly and perfectly with 20th century European political factions in order to come out with an answer is a flawed analytical method.
Yes, trying to figure out if Hitler was a, quote, "I'm with her" guy or a member of the Republican Party in 2016 is silly. But luckily, that is not what historians and others are actually doing when they approach this topic.
What do we do now? Well, to answer this correctly, first, we need to ensure objectivity to our analysis.
These guys very often present themselves as, quote, "rational skeptics" who are just presenting the
Logic, motherfuckers. It's such a shame that Dusty Smith came up with that, because Dusty's actually one of the few that turned out okay in the end. But it's just funny that the logic, motherfuckers, was his thing.
objective facts. I talked more about this method in my previous video, whereby it was used by a literal out-and-about Nazi. The general gist of it is to depoliticize history as a science, and to portray it as a series of crystallized, unchanging facts, which just so happen to correspond to the person's worldview. You assert things as, quote, just the facts, and reason your way towards why these so-called facts you're presenting are true, without relying on much evidence produced by trained historians. You sidestep the actual debates and uncertainties of history in order to simplify the larger picture. The point is to cleverly avoid actually engaging with history and instead relying on debate and argumentation.
Yeah, exactly. He's trying to avoid the thing of saying, oh, the Nazis were actually left-wing, because he knows that's not really a tenable position that you can back up. But you also can't say that they're right-wing, because then that implicates that he might be closer to the Nazis than he wants to represent. So just say, oh, it's nuanced. Rationality and logic, motherfuckers.
I've talked about so-called objective history in past videos. I'll summarize by saying history is aspirationally objective, but practically cannot be objective because the fundamental nature...
Of course it can. Like, right, the only things in history that are objective are dates. Dates. And they're the least interesting or worthwhile thing about history. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're unimportant. Like, knowing that the First World War comes before the Second World War, although it's sort of in the name... But it's sort of, you know, if you don't understand that one thing leads to the other thing, and that's the order in which they happened, that takes away from your understanding of both events. But in terms of like, oh, such and such happened on X date, is the least interesting thing about it. Like in British history, you're always taught, right, Battle of Hastings, 1066. But who gives a fuck that it happened in 1066? Or 1068, or 1070, or 1050. It's so long ago that it basically doesn't matter. And yet the only thing I bet that anyone can tell me about the Battle of Hastings is that it happened in 1066. Because it's just drilled into your head. That's the thing you need to know. Rather than any of the actually massive, epoch-defining and future-defining political, military and economic ripples that happen from that battle.
Of the field necessitates all sorts of selection and interpretation that cannot be fully divorced from subjectivities. Here's a quote by E.H. Carr from his book What is History? Quote, Everyone
go and random some random geek. Or even everyone go and follow some random geek on all of the platforms.
The facts of history cannot be purely objective, since they become facts of history only in virtue of the significance attached to them by the historian. Objectivity in history, if we
exactly, like, okay, again, I'll go to the American Civil War, right? We know the exact dates on which the Battle of Gettysburg took place, right? We know the exact times that different parts of the battle took place. We know the different units that took place in different that were stationed in different parts of the battlefield. And if you go to the Gettysburg National Park, you can experience all of that. But tell me, why did it happen? Why did it happen then? Why couldn't they have done something else? Why do the people that make the decisions that lead to this battle make those decisions? What was the wider context? What led up to it? Why did they react in the way they did afterwards? That's all open to interpretation. Because you can't even rely on the people themselves to necessarily tell you the truth. We know the justification that Robert E. Lee gives. We know the recriminations of people like Pickett. But obviously they have their own skews on things. And indeed they exist and operate in a political world where they have to justify things. And of course, given that they were both generals in an army that was defeated and they were potentially facing legal ramifications, they had to present themselves in the best possible light. So everything about that event is open to interpretation. Everything. So there's no objectivity here. It's all, well, what's your interpretation of this? What were your answers to the questions I put before you? based on the facts available. And you ask 100 historians and you'll get 100 fucking answers. And they'll be slightly different. And sometimes they'll be vastly different. But as long as you can sort of back this shit up a bit, you can have your interpretation, and that's fine. But don't pretend to be a fucking scientist of history, because that's not a thing.
Are still to use that conventional term, cannot be objectivity of facts, but only of relation, of the relation between the fact and interpretation, between past, present, and future.
Focus on attitudes towards private property, individual freedom, and wealth redistribution patterns. If needed, even implementing a mathematical apparatus.
What does he even mean by this?
Also, we should explore and take...
Yeah, what do you mean? How do you apply mathematics to history in this? I mean, obviously you can do, like, you know, adding up the numbers of people killed in a battle or something. But, like, you can't put a mathematical model together to decide the political persuasions of a certain historical movement. That's fucking inane.
Take into consideration the political allegiances that occurred historically and the sort of opposition to the regime in question, the Nazis. So let's do that.
Now, he says we're going to evaluate whether these regimes lean left or right based on those criteria, but first he constructs a new category called totalitarian dictatorship.
What defines totalitarianism? Centralized authority.
E equals MC squared. There you go. That defines totalitarianism. And I especially love that because the man who came up with it was Jewish, so applying it to the Nazis would make them spin in their graves. LOL!
Authority, strength in the military, militarism with resources directed to...
And that's not even just a silly joke on my part. You know, Hitler literally said to Einstein, to his fucking face, that that nuclear physics was Jewish science. Said it right to his fucking face. Before he got into power and then Einstein had to leave for his own fucking safety. And then take his shit to America, where they used his expertise to then build a fucking bomb that defeated... Well, technically didn't defeat Germany, it defeated Japan, but you get the idea.
Population, authoritarianism and dictatorial rule, repression of freedom of speech and freedom of the press, systematic elimination of political opposition by violence, expansionistic foreign policies, and conquest through military might. Already note that all three historical totalitarian regimes of the 20th century fit very neatly within this box.
Going back to his definition of totalitarian dictatorship.
I would say that's more authoritarianism rather than totalitarianism. I think that is slightly different. You know. Yeah, Einstein should definitely have clapped back at him. Like, you ain't done shit, motherfucker. Not only do I do science better than you, I bet I can draw better than you fucking little hairy-lipped prick. And I fucked your mom.
It has numerous issues.
Actually, to be fair to him, Einstein laid pipe. Didn't he have like 9 kids or some shit? Einstein was a master cocksman. You can quote me on that.
A brutal and repressive dictatorship that for one reason or another is incapable of carrying out expansionist foreign policy. By his definition, this may not be a totalitarian dictatorship because it's not invading its neighbors. Now imagine a dictatorship that does carry out belligerent and hostile foreign policy and even invades countries, but doesn't actually...
Einstein wasn't involved with the Manhattan Project. But his science, and indeed his lecturing, which many of the scientists who were involved in the Manhattan Project attended many of his lectures and were taught by him, undoubtedly educated them and allowed them to see the other world, as it were, to see the kind of nuclear capabilities, and to then take that expertise and learning to then build a bomb, etc., etc. You know. And there's no doubt that a lot of Jewish scientists that left Germany would have been very useful to the Nazi regime if they weren't such racist pricks and forced them to leave. You know? Or indeed those that didn't leave were just murdered, you know, or demoted or whatever.
Annex these countries, instead leaving puppet regimes in their wake. maybe on the other side of the planet even. They wouldn't fit the bill. The only really good criteria on this list that is practically useful in any sense is, quote, dictatorial rule. It stands to reason that for something to be a totalitarian dictatorship, if such a thing exists, it must of course be a dictatorship. Beyond that, the definition is so broad as to encompass virtually every nation on Earth. Most states engage in aspects of these things to varying degrees. The degree to which you believe any of these specific points apply to any specific nation is completely down to your personal understanding of these terms and the nations.
Why were Hitler and Einstein talking? Well, they were both prominent people in Germany in the Weimar years. Einstein, I think, had won a Nobel Prize by this point. He was certainly world famous. And Hitler was an up-and-coming political actor, a member of the Reichstag, a member of the... Was it called the Reichstag at the time? I think it might have been. Whatever. The German parliament. So yeah, they were both well-known people. The idea that they would have bumped into each other at a social event is... I mean, that makes a lot of sense that they would. Like in the same way that Abraham Lincoln and Karl Marx were pen pals. Now, they wouldn't have described it that way, and it was a little more serious than like, oh, hey Karl, just dropping you a line to say I'm doing really well. Like, it's, it wasn't that. They were both politically minded, educated men. At a time when not that many people were. So of course they would talk to one another. It was just a thing. Like, you've got to get out of your head that the time in which Hitler and Einstein had met and talked face to face, Hitler wasn't the Hitler you now know. Like, he had the potential within him to be a mass murdering genocidal freak, but at the time he was just like a rabble rousing politician. He was Nigel Farage. He was an up-and-coming person who might one day be the leader of something, but maybe not. He was kind of shouty, fucking bigoted prick. But that's all he was. He hadn't fucking killed anyone at this point. Although I suppose the brown shirts were getting a bit fucking violent. But, like, he hadn't, done a war or be engaged in a genocide yet. He was just a fucking wanker. So yeah, in high society, yeah, two people met at an event and talked. And Einstein probably went, he's a wanker, he'll never achieve anything, and then had to leave eventually because it got fucking serious. So there you go.
Personally, you have to make an assessment of how strongly you feel that a nation has enough of these things to qualify. This isn't the kind of objective measure.
Okay, he killed people in World War One, but that's a war. I mean, yes, technically he had killed people, although for the most part he was a runner, he was a message carrier. But he had fought and shot and presumably killed people. But that wasn't murder, it was war. That's a different thing entirely. According to Wikipedia, Einstein had 3 kids by his first wife, a second wife, and a total of 5 known side pieces during his second marriage. Yeah, look, he liked to lay pipe. Einstein was a man of tight physics and loose morals.
Sure, he portrays it as. To demonstrate my point, he says he'll prove that these 3 nations fit the bill, and to do so he literally just goes down the list and makes an assessment and says that they do. He does a little, quote, thought exercise to prove that 1940s Germany didn't have freedom of speech.
And are we sure? Well, let me prove it to you. Let's do a little thought exercise. You are in 1940s Germany. You disagree with Adolf Hitler's opinions, so you go to Berlin and in front of the whatever government building that they have there, you say, Hitler was an idiot. Yeah. Do you think you're going to survive that?
This isn't how you work with history. You don't think your way towards an answer, you find evidence to back up your claim.
Yeah, you can go like, yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah, you don't have to do this fucking hypothetical bullshit. You can go to like the Edelweiss Pirates, a group of rebellious youth who opposed the Nazis in reality and were murdered for it. You don't have to do you don't have to be hypothetical about it. There are plenty of examples of people who stood up to the Nazis and were killed.
His argument here is 100% reliant on your personal understanding of Nazi Germany, not related to any evidence whatsoever. His argument is compelling because you understand Nazi Germany to be oppressive, and you're right. But he's not actually teaching you anything. He's saying, you believe this, therefore my point stands. This isn't history.
Erection equals massive cock squared. See, this is the kind of science I can get into.
Pandering to you, and even though what he just said was correct, it is still pandering.
So what this tells us is that these...
Trust me, you need an erect cock monster, or whatever the fuck it was, for a real Big Bang. I'm telling you.
are not necessarily unique features of the right or the left, but they manifest as common ground on the extremes of said spectrum. It's
horseshoe, baby.
It's the horseshoe effect. Extremes touch, even if...
But he's saying this unironically. He's saying unironically, the horseshoe. I am doing the horseshoe.
Ideologically, when compared with communism, fascism is indeed right-wing.
Horseshoe theory is complete bunk. It relies on surface-level similarities between certain right and left-wing regimes in history. I don't think historians put much stock in the idea, instead opting for a more nuanced and holistic analysis that doesn't entirely sideline the ideological differences between these regimes. What Metatron is actually observing isn't the similarities between right and left-wing extremes, but the similarities between two different regimes wielding state power. The reason I think that the horseshoe theory is compelling is that both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were ideologically opposed to democratic liberalism, which means that those regimes in many ways were both quite different from the ones most of us live under today. The difference from us, is something they both share, even if at a closer look the regimes really aren't that similar. A comprehensive breakdown of the differences between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union is beyond the scope of this video, so I'll move on for now.
Now, in Europe, conventionally, Nazism is generally considered to be a far-right ideology, and communism, which is, of course, a left-wing extreme ideology. But once you start to look at this from the American political perspective, then the situation becomes muddy, if you will, necessitating a more nuanced, item-by-item approach.
If you recall, early in this video he said that one problem with this is that Americans are trying to apply their 21st century understanding of politics onto a 20th century European political movement. And now he's saying that because there are differences between Nazi Germany and the positions of American Republican voters, the situation is muddy and Nazi Germany isn't entirely right-wing. Why are you looking at it, quote, from the American political perspective? Surely there must be better criteria than the political understanding of the median American voter. Full
literally, yeah.
Offense intended to the median American voter.
You see, the Nazis, for example, had nationalized healthcare. Government was deeply involved in every aspect of industry, so we're talking about big government. The Nazis were not in favor of...
They invented the word privatization, or privatization, or whatever the fuck you want to pronounce it.
Free market capitalists. And yes, I'll defend this one in the next section. And all of this sounds left of center to an American, so it is mixed.
All of this is, of course, said with zero citations.
On the following section.
Also, by the way, no one is suggesting that that any political movement like this is entirely left-wing or entirely right-wing. Because it depends what you exactly mean by left or right-wing. It could be argued from an absolutist anarchist point of view that they're all right-wing because they all believe in a state. But obviously that, I think, leaves a certain lack of nuance to the situation. So, like... Or you could say, from a very, very right-wing perspective, well, they weren't all 100% Aryan, so it was actually left-wing race mixing or some shit. Like, every single regime that's ever existed has had left-wing and right-wing elements to it. It's overall, where would you put it? And clearly, it was very much on the right. They certainly believe themselves to be very much on the fucking right.
I'm going to present the characteristics of the regime, and then you decide where it leans.
Also, Italians, it's regime. Regime. Stop it. Stop it. I know your English is way better than my Italian, but that's not the point.
Most towards.
As so often happens, these guys pretend they're just presenting the facts, and then they pretend to outsource that analysis to you. A historian's job is to provide analysis, not to say, you decide what happened, smiley face. They're being lazy, dishonest, and cowardly, and they hide behind this...
Well, it's lazy, yeah. You're like, I hate that kind of history where it's sort of like, well, it's up to you. No. Tell me what you fucking think. I know what I think. I buy a book because I want to see what the author has to say about a thing. Don't tell me it's all about opinions and then say, oh, well, it's up to you at the end of the day. No, tell me what you fucking think, you prick. I already know what's in my head. What the fuck's in your head? Fuck's sake. It's lazy and... yeah, cowardly. Give a fucking opinion. Even if it's a shit opinion. If you try and back it up, at least that's interesting. Like... no, I was going to give a really bad example. I won't bother. But like, if you give an opinion, even that I find offensive, if you try and back it up and it's like your actual opinion and you're arguing it from a position of honesty, even if it's incorrect honesty, even if it's bollocks, I can respect that. That's worthwhile. Whereas doing this, well, you make your own mind up yourself. Eat my cock.
Of objectivity to push impressionable people who are unfamiliar with the topic towards specific conclusions. In the following section, he doesn't cite any...
oh, we're watching a video by a guy called Fredda. Now, I don't know Fredda. I've never heard of this person before, but it was suggested to me, and I thought, I hate the 3 people he's mentioned in the fucking name, so, like, yeah, let's have a look.
at all, and for some reason brings up whether or not the Nazis had, quote, identity politics.
A central idea of communist ideology was opposition to private ownership of the means of production, which blended with economic intervention within the private and public sectors.
What do you mean a central tenet of communist ideology is economic interventionism in the private sector? A central tenet of communist ideology is the opposition to the existence of the private sector. What is economic interventionism in the public sector? That's already owned by the state. That's the public sector.
Now, to that, Nazism was different up to a certain extent. Let me clarify. Their overall economic approach favored big business and opposed labor unions, which of course doesn't make it sound socialist by any means.
All of what he just said is correct. See Adam Tooze's Wages of Destruction or my past video, Capitalism in Nazi Germany, if you want more info.
Friedrich Pollock says, open quote, I agree that the legal institution of private ownership was maintained and that many attributes characteristic for National Socialism begin to manifest themselves, albeit still vaguely in non-totalitarian countries. But does this mean that the function of private ownership did not change? I believe it reaches far more deeply and should be described as the destruction of all the essential traits of private ownership.
He quotes Friedrich Pollock as to why Nazi Germany's private ownership was functionally destroyed. And I'm pretty
Pollock, not Pillock. That was the previous video.
certain he got this quote from the Mises Institute, which is also where Tick History, who I covered in the past, got a lot of his stuff from. The Mises Institute is...
No, the Mises Institute is fine, okay, because it's technically a febophilia, so it's fine.
Right-wing libertarian think tank. Metatron, of course, doesn't cite this quote properly, and in this instance that is more important than you might think. For one, he actually misquotes Pollock, and leaves out the ending of the sentence. When you want to cut off parts of a quote that aren't relevant, you should indicate that you have done so. He does not. The full quote reads, should be described as the destruction of all the essential traits of private ownership, saving one exception. Pollock's argument isn't that capitalism is gone, it's that capitalism's management has been transferred into the hands of the state, while keeping the actual ownership and profits in private hands. He calls it, quote, divorce between ownership and control. It's
which, by the way, was exactly how Benito Mussolini, 707's in chat, described fascism. That was literally his definition, was the complete rolling up of private enterprise and the government. That's what he described as. Now, I think that is a necessary but insufficient description. But I just want to give you some extra context for that, historically speaking.
Conceptualized as state capitalism. I don't fully agree with that, but that's what Pollock believes, and it isn't quite what Metatron represents his beliefs as. This isn't the most important thing that Metatron leaves out, though. The most important part is that this was written in 1941, long before any serious historical appraisals of Nazi Germany had been undertaken, by the simple virtue of the fact that the Nazi period wasn't over yet. Even the economist writing here, not as a historian but as an economist, cannot hope to have all the information and data necessary available to him. What follows is an argument that Hitler would allow private ownership and management of business so long as the businesses complied with the needs of the state. And in Metatron's view, this isn't really private ownership or capitalism. He calls this
socialism disguised as capitalism.
This is central to his argument that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were cut from the same cloth. He says that Nazi Germany looks like capitalism, but is actually socialism. What follows is a very funny section that might seem familiar to some that have watched my old videos on What of Old Hist. These guys all use the same talking points.
Alright, now I would like to dedicate a small section to race. With that being said, let's also remember that if you think that racism denotes right-wing position, then you would classify Karl Marx as a right-winger. And the reason I say that is because if you actually read the article he published in 1844 called On the Jewish Question, you would absolutely consider to be racist.
He claims to have read On the Jewish Question, but probably hasn't, or if he did, he didn't really understand it. It was written in response to Bruno Bauer's The Jewish Question, hence the title On the Jewish Question. Bruno Bauer's text is very anti-Semitic, and Karl Marx is arguing against Bruno Bauer's anti-Semitic arguments. Karl Marx himself was born to a Jewish family. To modern ears, much of the language employed by Marx and even the title understandably sounds shocking, but that's because we're viewing it outside of its historical context. That being said, there are examples.
Okay, but to be fair, Karl Marx at no point in either that particular article or anywhere else denounces Hamas. Sorry, Hamas. So clearly an anti-Semite. Clearly a supporter of Jombly Crumblins.
Also of Karl Marx being overtly racist in letters, particularly towards LaSalle, which Metatron could have highlighted. Karl Marx undoubtedly harbored certain anti-Semitic and other racist beliefs, but bringing up this particular text is a very lazy and widespread right-wing talking point that isn't really convincing. I would argue that Karl Marx was perhaps less racist than the average German man in the 1800s, but that this also isn't saying much because German men in the 1800s were very racist.
But to be fair, they weren't much less racist in the 20th century. Just saying. I mean, we are literally talking about the Nazis, so, you know, just to put that in context for you.
Labor this point because the point Metatron is trying to make is silly. Racism is not an inherently right-wing position, and nobody sensible would argue as such. Anyone can be racist. I believe he's saying this defensively, because he himself knows that racism is more prevalent on the right. In fact, much of this video can be viewed as defensive, particularly the last portion in which he gets very hung up on whether or not Hitler is a Christian, which I don't think is very relevant. In the conclusion to this video...
It's not relevant, but he was. Like, it doesn't matter. It wouldn't change my opinion of him if he were an atheist, or a fucking Buddhist, or a Zoroastrian, or anything else. It would change my opinion of him if he were Jewish. That would be weird. That would be like a really fucking weird thing. But other than that, because of the, you know, the thing, yeah, it wouldn't change my opinion of him, because it doesn't really matter. But he was a Christian.
Metatron invites you to do a political compass test and try to imagine what Hitler's answers to each question would be, and then see where you end up. Once again, relying on your preconceived notions of who Hitler was, instead of actually educating.
Therefore, Nazism should not be judged by whatever words Hitler crafted, and it should not be considered neither left nor right, at least in the political sense. The only thing in which Hitler believed was accumulating personal power, and we have a name for that: totalitarianism. Thank you for watching.
Absolutely.
To conclude, I'd like to read a couple of quotes from Roderick Stackelberg, an expert on Nazi Germany. The conventional image of Nazi Germany as a totalitarian monolith in which every aspect of life was totally controlled from the top is misleading in several respects. For one thing, it implies that Nazi rule was maintained solely by coercion rather than, as was more generally the case, by popular consensus. The three dots indicate that I'm skipping later to the text here. It should be remembered that much that took place in Nazi Germany was not distinctively Nazi. Most importantly, perhaps, the monolith model fails to take into account the persistence of conflict and differences within and between government, party, and societal institutions, despite their hierarchical command structures. Quoting him again from the introduction.
And indeed, it was sort of deliberately designed, at least in part, in that way. Hitler wanted there to be what is usually referred to in academic circles as overlapping magisteria. The idea of having people who have, at the edge of their field of control, things that overlap with other people's control, so that you get fighting amongst the underlings, so that they don't unite to then challenge his power. And that was something he constantly did. They built bureaucracy upon bureaucracy precisely for this purpose. They already had a system of regional control in the Weimar Republic, and they built the what was the system called they had? The Gauer system, where each Gower, as it was called, not Gower as in the former England opening batsman David Gower, but Gower as in a regional district, which was essentially a party-led regional district bureaucracy that existed not necessarily co-equally, but at the same time as that normal bureaucracy. You see what I mean? And yeah, it was a fuck up.
In my interpretation, Nazism is unambiguously a movement of the right, a conservative end of the spectrum. Stackelberg approaches some of the topics that Metatron brought up early in this video, like Americans getting confused about how to interpret Nazism from their perspective, totalitarianism theory, and on similarities between extreme movements and so on. I would recommend reading this book over watching Metatron's video if you would like to understand Nazi Germany. I think Metatron isn't a very big fan of Hitler, and is understandably also not a fan of his politics and his views being associated with Hitler, which is why he wants as much distance as possible from him and his movement. Of course, no reasonable person is going to look at the Nazis and think that they were left-wingers. Not even Metatron thinks that. So his only recourse is to say nothing and pretend like it's nuance. Yep. I remember Metatron as a channel that did talks on history topics, but now it seems to largely be low-effort React content. And yep. I mean lower effort than mine. I at least write a script. And also it seems much of it panders towards right-wing young men who are frustrated about video games being too woke.
The usual politics in games and the culture war. In this case, the battleground is Oblivion Remaster. Man, Elder Scrolls 6, I really hope they don't put politics. I really hope they don't inject a lot of politics in these games. If it's a tiny little bit, it's not a big deal, I'll mod it out. And I'm just being honest with you. I'm not being hateful. I don't hate anyone. Live your life however you see fit.
He says if you're gay, if you use they/them pronouns, if you've got blue hair, then more power to you, so long as you live your life somewhere where he doesn't have to see you.
Final Fantasy Tactics is one of my favorite games ever. That game is so political that it's insane, but it's not divisive. But it's also the idea of using the video game as a medium to inject your positions. That's when I'm starting to have a problem.
No way. Artists using art to express political opinions. That's crazy. I'm glad that didn't happen in the past.
Because it feels like I'm being manipulated.
He's scared because the things he's seeing are different to what he's used to. He's not taking any sort of principled stance against people, quote, injecting their politics into games, because then he very much would not like Final Fantasy Tactics. Let me read what the original script, scenario writer, and editor's thoughts were on the politics of the game, published on June 5th with the announcement of the game's remaster. Quoting Yasumi Matsuno. Nearly 30 years ago, the collapse of Japan's bubble economy engulfed the nation's financial institutions in mountains of bad debt, triggering a wave of corporate bankruptcies, a sudden and extreme rise in unemployment rates, and stagnation of Japanese society as a whole. It was an era...
But it did ultimately lead to the former Japanese Prime Minister being shot with a homemade gun. So, you know, it's nuanced. I think the phrase "to be Shinzo Abe'd" should become a thing. That needs to be like Luigi Shinzo Abe, that guy, you know, that sort of thing.
When many were robbed of hope, when dreams were measured by their price tag. Against this historical backdrop, I crafted a story. It was the story of Ramza, a young man who fought tirelessly against the entrenched social class system. It was the story of Delita, who sought to take advantage of this confusion and despair to advance his own social position. It was a story of a peculiar destiny in which friendship and betrayal intertwine. And now in 2025...
And it led to Pokemon, which is inherently political. It's obviously a critique of the never-ending search for profits in a capitalist system. Literally the phrase "gotta catch 'em all" is, I believe, a reference to the inevitability of the falling rate of profit, because how can one truly catch all of the profits and continue to grow? Doesn't make sense. Pikachu was one of the foremost political theorists of his day. God bless him.
A time when inequality and division are still deeply rooted in our society, I offer this story once again. The will to resist is in your hands.
What are you trying to inject in my head?
Let's move on from Metatron.
Heroin.
Warming or whatever eco-disaster.
Look at this, look at the cunt. He's wearing a massive doily as a jumper or something.
Thing you want to sell. Now, I've challenged many politically correct people. There were so many fifth columnists and communists and the like dissenters.
This much loved and admired design of tank that the Russians built in World War II. And I just want to show you how bad it was in so many ways.
I still remember one video that stuck with younger me quite a bit. I think it was around 2012 or so when I started playing D&D. I saw a video of his where he reasoned that adventurers spelunking through dungeons and caves probably wouldn't carry their torch in front of them, because the bright light would interfere with your eye's ability to adjust to the darkness. Instead, you'd carry the torch to your side and behind you, so you can see what's ahead while carrying some light with you. And I thought, wow, he's smart. So I mostly watched for that kind of content, medieval fantasy and role-playing type stuff. Like the rest though, I started to notice things as I started learning more about how one works with history. Lindebeige is a reasonably old man, I think, though he's aged quite well, probably by virtue of being an avid dancer and not having his brain broken by the 2010s. Out of my selection here, he's probably the most normal one of the group. Many of the things he says and believes are kind of indistinguishable from what that one slightly racist old guy at the pub might say after...
Firstly, lovely Boris Johnson reference. And secondly, I've got a question for you all. Who is the most racist Italian we've seen in this stream? Fucking Confederate Luigi. Or Confederate Luigi. I'm going to hell anyway, who cares?
Point number 5. He complains about largely non-issues in a curmudgeonly way like Metatron does, but his issues are that someone at his dance rehearsal didn't like his gendered language, not that Nexus Mods is censoring his favorite anti-woke mod. It feels just as trivial of a topic to make a video about, but at least it's less terminally online. Lindebeige's history content is mostly sort of okay. It's entertainment. He mostly just...
I find him deeply boring, I'll be honest. Like, that's obviously just a personal preference thing, but I find his history stuff boring and his politics stuff also boring, but a little bit aggravating.
Talks about things he likes and finds cool. It's not super informative or well researched, but it's not terrible either. He's maybe going to say some weird things about women, non-binary people, climate change, the British Empire, or indigenous people, but if you look past that, then it's mostly okay, I think. Here's a video.
Phil Gornell, yes, we did have Mussolini on the stream, but are you saying Mussolini was racist and didn't just have economic concerns? Because that, yeah, he was quite racist, yeah.
He did at the Bovington Tank Museum about the Soviet T-34 tank from World War II. I chose this video because it's relatively recent, it's something I find interesting, and as you'll see, it fits the theme of my video.
But the Sherman was not actually the most common tank of World War II. No, that honor goes to the Russian T-34.
He refers to the tank as a, quote, Russian tank throughout the video, and whenever he refers to the Soviet Union at any point in time, he keeps referring to them as, quote, the Russians, with one exception.
The Russians were the Russians, and the Russian tanks.
The Russians, big Russians, but
the Russians.
This might sound like a nitpick, but this was not a Russian tank. This was a Soviet tank.
I don't think it's a nitpick when they were literally being led by a Georgian. Like, yeah. The Soviet Union, millions of people from the non-Russian parts of the Soviet Union fought and died in that war.
The tank was designed and manufactured in Kharkiv, Ukraine. To many, this stuff is understandably touchy after Russia invaded Ukraine.
Whoa, when did that happen? What? Russia invaded Ukraine? I'm surprised I didn't hear about that on the news. They kept that one quiet, didn't they? Eh?
It's quite close to the Russian border, and its civilian population is frequently victimized by Russian drone and missile attacks. Even if it wasn't for Russia's war of aggression, consistently calling it Russian is just wrong. It was Soviet. Strangely enough, at one point he calls the Soviets the Russians, says the Germans invaded the Soviet Union, and that the T-34 was made in Ukraine, all in the span of about 30 seconds.
The crudeness of this tank is just funny. I mean, the crudeness of the casting here, it's just so lumpy and bumpy. The quality of the metal is not the greatest, and some of the welds are hilariously bad.
Now, I'm going...
Wow, it's almost as if they had to churn these out really quickly, because they were being invaded by, at that point, the most successful, rapacious, and quick-moving force that had ever been known on the Earth. Apologies that it doesn't look very neat, though. Like, I will just point out, there were tanks that left from the Red Barakadi factory in Stalingrad that they didn't even bother painting. So desperate were they to get them off the production line and into the battle. But, you know, the welding isn't very good. Fucking cunt. What a cunt, honestly. You should really, you should apologise. You should apologise, Soviet Union, sorry, Russia, just Russia, for daring to put out something that looks a bit rough around the edges. What you should have done is made everything perfect and just lost. That would have been fine. What's wrong with that? God, I fucking hate. I hate history nerds that are like this. I hate people that give a fuck about, like, these weird reenactor freaks in America who give a fuck about, oh, well, this unit wouldn't have worn this type of hat, or this specific button or badge wouldn't have been on the thing, and they only had 2 stripes on their epaulette rather than 3. And you just, you fucking ruin yourself, you freak. You fucking mutant. Taking any semblance of joy or realism out of the situation completely. Living history makes me want to die.
Going to complain about how he keeps talking about how aspects of this tank are bad. But on several occasions it seems like he understands their purpose and understands that the T-34, which he says could be manufactured at a rate once every half an hour, is by that virtue better than the statistically equivalent German tank that took 6 months to produce. He oscillates between evaluating the tank as a whole as a seemingly good tank, and also calling every aspect of it trash. I'll get to why I think that is later on. I don't know much about metal quality or welding. I've never welded something in my life. I asked military history friends and an actual tanker about some of these things, but all that is anecdotal, unverifiable, and not very persuasive when making arguments about history. Does the lumpiness and bumpiness actually mean the tank's going to be less effective? Do the appearance of those welds mean that? What sort of actual effect does this have on the tank's ability to serve its purpose on the battlefield? Do any of these things actually matter? It's easy to look at things that look bad and reason that it must mean they are bad, but how are you actually judging the quality of anything you're looking at?
Well, it's probably not very aerodynamic, but given that it was not necessarily built for racing, I don't see that as relevant. And the T-34 was an exceptionally good tank for its day, yeah.
He doesn't go into detail, he just says it's bad.
And some of the welds are hilariously bad.
Quoting from the first page of Chapter 1 of the Tanks of Operation Barbarossa, one of the most widespread mistakes is the tendency to look at tanks from former years from a contemporary standpoint and to evaluate them using modern criteria. Such an approach has its attractions. In the first place, it is simple, and secondly, it allows us to sense our superiority over the people of the past, who created and used those tanks, in which today we see so many imperfections and flaws. At the same time, often blaming of one or another detail of a tank for its shortcomings is in fact a result of the elementary misunderstanding of how, why, and for what purpose each detail was made part of it from the beginning. Whatever led to the welds looking so crude may be a deliberate design decision and actually be a bonus to how one should evaluate this tank. Quoting again, there is one more important category that influences the design of tanks, the level of modern technology. Not only at the abstract worldwide level, but in the manufacturing capabilities of each specific factory that planned to produce them. This also includes the number and qualifications of its workers, the presence and capabilities of its manufacturing equipment, its financial resources, the availability of time, raw materials and component parts, the possibility of cooperating with other factories, etc. In other words, an assessment may have been made that a satisfactory quality of weld was achievable at the planned production factories with the available skilled labor power, with available raw resources, and that a quote higher quality would not be worth an increase in labor power or a lowered rate of production. Now, there's actually a much more important factor to mention when it comes to the welds, that Lindebeige unfortunately does not mention. The so-called prettier German tanks often utilized interlocking armor plates which had to be hand-welded by highly qualified electric welders. As Germany had no shortage of skilled labor or machine tools, production wasn't limited by this. Instead, it was limited by raw resources. Soviet tank production faced different challenges. The T-34's production utilized, quote, the foremost technological achievements of that time, which included automatic welding, as opposed to highly skilled and time-consuming manual welding. A good rule of thumb if you're ignorant about something from the past is to start from the assumption that they knew exactly what they were doing, not that you're smarter than them.
They thought to themselves, well, a tank's going to last maybe, 3 months in action, so why make it so well crafted that it'll last for 70 years? No, it's going to blow up in 3 months, so make it good enough to just about last 3 months, and then it'll have done its job. One way of looking at it is it's like a hand grenade. It's a disposable item that you use them up. Now,
is that so much different from any other tank? Yes, tanks were not designed to become museum pieces, yet here you are standing in front of one, and according to the very museum you're standing in, quote, after the war, T-34-85s continued in service around the world with over 40 nations for many decades. There are 3 T-34-85s at Bovington. I don't know which one he's referring to at any specific point because he never says, but all 3 have different histories. This could either be one that was used in the Korean War, one used by the Czechoslovakian army, or one built in Poland between 1951 and 1955. Only one of these 3 is confirmed to be wholly built in the Soviet Union. One's hull is confirmed to be built in the Soviet Union, and one was entirely built in Poland. These factors may all play a part in the way the tank appears.
So you can see actually it does overhang the front a little bit, and they've just there's a bit of a bodged solution there with a extra bar of metal added on.
Botched, meaning make or repair something badly or clumsily, but he doesn't really go in.
No, Fredo, okay. Like, English is probably not this person's first language by the accent. Bodge doesn't mean quite that. It doesn't mean to repair badly. You can bodge something and it be perfectly good. It can be literally a fantastic 100% solution to the problem. It means to deal with in an unconventional, haphazard fashion. So it doesn't mean botch, as in to do a thing mistakenly. You can usually when someone says bodge, they kind of do mean that, I think, but I don't know that you can necessarily imply 100% that that's what the context there. I bodged my headphones that I literally see on my table here, right? I wrapped sellotape around the broken piece so they would stick and I could still use them, right? That's a bodge. That's a haphazard, unorthodox, non-professional way of doing it, but it worked perfectly for the needs of that item. Botch or bodge. Well, that's what I mean. They're 2 different things, Rachel, right? So botch, B-O-T-C-H, means to essentially fuck something up, right? To mistake something. Whereas bodge, B-O-D-G-E, is a kind of English slang term, which often means to fix something in an imperfect or fucked up way, but can just mean you're doing it in a slightly odd or clumsy way, but it can still work perfectly well. So it's sort of, it's maybe a slight lost in translation there. But no, I mean, it's not a big deal, but I just... Like, there is so much to pick apart with the shit history of Lindy Beige that I don't think you need to make this point, but, yeah. Apparently they're Norwegian, Rachel. The Freda, the guy that's making this video.
Into why that little bit of metal is bad. Quoting once again from the same book, from the same first page of Chapter 1. It should be noted that the success or failure of various models of tanks is determined to a great extent by their capability to be adapted in a timely manner to the constantly changing tactical demands throughout their service life. If an adaptation could be made by welding on a tiny bit of extra metal, that seems like a very cost-effective solution.
Look at the quality of the craftsmanship. Look at this just gap. They haven't welded it. There's a gap between the side plate and the back plate. And these bolt holes, you see, don't all have bolts in. But what the hell, that's enough to hold it on. Just shove it out the factory, it'll be fine.
On the topic of the lack of bolts and the missing weld, allow me to quote again, this time from Chapter 9. The result of fasteners used to build the tanks noticeably decreased, and a large number of superfluous parts were discovered.
Oh, I fucking loved Bodger and Badger. Yeah. Bodger and Badger, Bodger and Badger. Oh, I just want to play Bodger and Badger now. For those who don't know, Bodger and Badger was a TV show from like the 90s, I think. There we go, Bodger and Badger. Theme! Fuck yes.
This is CBeebies on YouTube. Find even more fun and games for your child at the CBeebies website.
This is no. There we go.
Everywhere he goes, Bodger always knows. Badger is Badger, mates never far away. Bodger and Badger, la 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 la, Badger never far away. Everybody knows, Badger loves mashed potatoes. Excellent to shapes and eats them every day. Bodger and
Oh, I'm literally raving out, motherfuckers.
Chef wanted. Great.
Bodger and Badger. Honestly, I was raving out to that. I was giving it big fish, little fish cardboard box. I was having it large.
Guarded. For example, by the beginning of 1942, 5,641 parts of 1,265 items were removed from the tank's design, and
This
by the end of that
aggressively
year,
British.
this figure reached 6,237 parts. In the process, the list of fasteners was reduced by 21%. According to a graph on the same page, the labor input between January 1942 and July 1945...
Don't forget, if you're enjoying my Bodger and Badger related content, you can sub to the channel. You can do bits messages, super chats. You can become a member on the YouTubes, all of that shit. For my Bodger and Badger mashed potato T34 related content.
was at one factory reduced by as much as 62.4%. Granted, that factory had required a much higher initial labor input than others. At the seemingly more efficient Kharkiv plant, the reduction in the same period was 39.5%. These weren't just cost-cutting measures to make things cheaper, these were measures taken to adapt to the realities of the war, to maintain rate of production in the face of, quote, colossal human material and manufacturing resources left behind in occupied territories, the mass evacuation of industry, the loss of economic ties, and the overloading of the transport system with military shipments and the interruptions in deliveries of components, parts, and materials in connection with this.
And even
just thinking about it, it doesn't for anyone who can remember, do you know the book The Ragged Trousered Philanthropists? Isn't one of the companies called something like Bodgum and Slickit or something like that? So isn't the word bodge, isn't that like a really old reference, bodge? Bodge? Yeah, look. Forced to bodge and scrimp. Yeah. And that book was written in like the fucking 20s or some shit? 1914 that was written, and they used the word bodge. So bodge is a fucking old English word, really. There you go. Wonder what made me think of that. Mad what the memory does. In my mind, I went from Bodger and Badger to the Ragged Trousered Philanthropists. There you go. Thank you, Dr. Phil Decker. Says, Kev, do you remember Nightmare? That's Nightmare spelled with a K. On ITV. I don't remember Nightmare. I don't, Phil, if I'm entirely honest. Why are there no techno remixes of Bodger and Badger? There probably are, but I don't want to look for them.
Today, so lovingly looked after by the people here at the Tank Museum at Bovington. You see it's dripping oil onto the deck, black. I've seen almost no oil dripping onto the ground from many tanks, but this one does.
He spots an oil spill, and that could have been formed for any number of reasons. I asked my tanker friend, who told me, quote, if it's a class 3 where a puddle is formed, that means it's deadlined, but not like a, oh, you can't use it. More of a, oh, regular maintenance needs to happen soonish. He also told me any military vehicle...
Yeah, exactly. Like, this hasn't been used by the Soviet Union in decades. This particular vehicle you're standing in front of has been owned by a museum. If it's broken, they broke it.
This will face maintenance challenges like this under the stress of use. Even so, this speaks to a larger problem with how Lindy Beige approaches history. He saw that puddle and reasoned his way towards what actually was going on instead of figuring it out. He believes the T-34 is a shoddy piece of craftsmanship and spots a small oil puddle and uses it to confirm his preconceptions instead of asking what caused that. He reasons that since he hasn't seen any oil puddle near any of the other tanks, this must mean this is an issue with the T-34. Then he moves on without considering what could have caused it. I'm not one to get involved in these weird discussions about what equipment.
Are there raiders who raided? What happened here? What? I mean, welcome raiders, but I didn't know there was even a raid. Oh, My Left Eye. Hello, My Left Eye. Welcome in. Everyone go and follow My Left Eye on the YouTubes.
And was best or anything of the sort. I also have no special attachment to the T-34. Granted, it is the first and I believe the only tank that I've seen with my own eyes, so in a way that makes it special to me, but...
The T-34 has a huge... I have an attachment to it because it has a huge role in saving human civilization. Without the T-34, the Soviet Union probably get rolled over, and probably Europe falls entirely under the Nazi grip. So, like, it's, you know, it's saved to some extent Europe, I guess. I think that's worth something. Now, of course, it wasn't the inanimate object. It was the people inside it, the people who made it, the people who maintained it, of course, that actually won the war. But without that technology, the German forces would have been able to run through them. Wait, are you saying the Red Army wasn't in the process of invading the museum when Lindy Beige filmed that video? Yes, I am literally saying that, 255. Actually, yes. Yes. Yeah.
But it's also just a tool of war. Lindy Beige oscillates between calling every aspect of the T-34's craftsmanship rubbish, and evaluating the tank as a whole as a tank that does its job. When he talks about how the tank sucks in various ways, he's looking at it not as a historian, but as a fan of tanks. He's looking at it from a very subjective aesthetic perspective. He thinks elements of it looks ugly, so he critiques that. He thinks it's poorly constructed, so he critiques that. He sees improvised adaptations and doesn't like that. He makes reference to how British tanks do things better, because he thinks those are cooler and more practical. Those familiar with him know he's a bit of a British nationalist. But then he steps into the...
Yes, he's a twat.
The historian role and says that the T-34 is statistically just as good as the Panther, but the T-34 took 30 minutes to make and the Panther took 6 months, which obviously would make the T-34 better. And then he goes back to talking...
A lot better. A lot better. Think of the amount of labour that frees up, or the amount of fighting power that frees up. If you can create the same number of tanks in a day that the Nazis would take years to create. Because, as pointed out previously, tanks don't last that long. Even if you make them really, really super duper well, they don't actually last that long in war. Because they get shot at by other tanks, and by planes and bombs and guns. Yeah, they don't last very long. So if they take a long time to create, they take a long time to replace. So you need, ideally, a production line churning out fucking thousands of the bastard things. Which is exactly what the Soviet Union did, that the Nazis never did. It also had the knock-on effect that so much of the productive capacity was spent building tanks that they essentially stopped building planes and ships. Which had the lasting effect that the Navy and Air Force were fucking done by like 1943, pretty much. As an effective fighting force, they were done. Which is why German cities were laid waste. Because all of those tanks they spent so long were being destroyed on the Eastern Front, and no German cities had any planes to defend them. So, you know, I would argue the T-34 was a lot better.
As if the T-34 is something bought off of Temu. My problem is that he doesn't make it clear when he's speaking as a fan and when he's speaking as a historian. He could have just said, personally I think this looks ugly, or he could have said, you might think the lack of welds and bolts here looks bad, but actually...
Yeah, the AK-47, similarly, yeah. It's still in use. The AK-47 is still one of the most popular fucking guns in the world, or variations thereof, because they're cheap, easy, and effective. It's almost a solved problem of munitions. The Soviet Union did so much with the potential for production. They really did.
It was found to be superfluous, and its removal reduced labor hours for production significantly. While it seems he wished the tank looked prettier, Lindebeige does arrive at a sort of conclusion that what matters in war is having equipment that does the job, and that something cheaper with downsides is better than having nothing at all, which is a correct conclusion to draw. Quoting from the tanks of Operation Barbarossa, "The worst tank in the world, which manages to show up at the right time in the right place, is immeasurably superior to the best tank, which fails to arrive when and where it is needed."
True.
For all these citations for this book, by the way, I would like to apologize. I have an ebook version and it's difficult to cite accurately. Unfortunately, while Lindebeige does seem to reach this conclusion, which I believe is correct, he does so after almost half an hour of talking about how every which aspect of the T-34 was, quote, bad. Quoting again, "Firepower, armor protection, and mobility are the most significant of the tactical and performance characteristics of tanks. That is, after you've taken stock of the tank's availability.
Matt, don't be a gun bore.
And even so, it has to be operated by a trained crew and used in a cohesive tactical and strategic whole to be effective. In the period under discussion, the medium tanks showed this balance best of all. From the period of view of the level of development of these three characteristics and their optimal balance, the undoubted leader among both Soviet and German tanks was the T-34. That's not to say that T-34 didn't have flaws, wasn't lacking in certain things, and so on. I'm sure it was. It's just to say that at the time, by sensible non-video gaming metrics, it's probably all around what best suits the needs of its nation in World War II. I think the T-34 was probably a good tank. Lindebeige has a website where he's posted little essays. In the opinion section, he's highlighted some of his most controversial ones. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a date stamp on any of these essays, but I also couldn't find any sort of retraction, apology, or corrections, so I assume they still in some way represent his views. I'm happy to be corrected on that, though. Your eyes might be drawn to his, quote, "What Holocaust?" essay. It luckily...
Oh, no. No. Okay, we might be about to change our mind about which one of the three is most fucking crazy and right wing. Maybe. Let's just hope it's a controversial title. He's gone with a controversial title to draw eyeballs and clicks. Maybe. Whew, let's dive in.
Isn't what you think. He takes exception to the term Holocaust on the basis that overemphasizing the Jews killed in the Holocaust may erase the millions of others. Personally, I think Holocaust is fine as a term to encompass all the peoples whom the Nazis attempted to exterminate. And personally, I prefer the Hebrew term, the Shoah, when I refer exclusively to the...
There is actually a point there. The term Holocaust, which means sacrifice, unfortunately is something of a Zionist piece of propaganda. The fact that that term is used. And the word Shoah, which means slaughter, murder, is much more accurate and worthwhile, and that's why a lot of Jewish people will use the word Shoah as opposed to Holocaust. The reason that I will use the term Holocaust, even though I understand the let's say problematic etymology involved, is because I want people to understand what I'm saying. And so I will use the word Holocaust because you don't have to explain what that is, whereas the word Shoah, burned offering, right? Yeah, you know what I mean though, like a sacrifice to God, or a thing like that, which obviously has problematic angles to it. In the same way that I will use the phrase IDF as opposed to IOF, even though I think IOF is the more accurate descriptor. If you say that, people don't know what it means. So you say IDF. Language is about language is about the transmission of information. And so specifically saying things that people won't understand is silly. Yeah, that's a bit much, Lord Fritos, but you know. Yeah, okay. What was I going to say? Yeah, in the same way, I'll describe myself as a bisexual, even though pansexual is more accurate, because people sort of know what bisexual means. So you don't have to explain further.
The Jews persecuted during the Holocaust. One point I want to address in his post here, though, is his use of the term, quote, attempted genocide. This is a common misconception. The Nazis did not just attempt a genocide, they carried out a genocide. Genocide is a legal term, and its definition is set out in the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide.
Yeah, some people think that you have to kill every single member of a group for it to really count, or something, which is fucking stupid. Because in that case, there has been, like, maybe 2 or 3 genocides ever, which is obviously nonsense.
It reads, quote, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. What's important is intent, and having carried out any of the acts under Article 2 with that intent. The intent must be to destroy it in whole or in part. And you can in fact be found guilty of genocide without having killed a single person. Here's how he introduces one of his essays, quote, in the far north of Scandinavia live people called Lapps. In a large country in Central Europe live people called Germans. The
It's Lapps, so those are the people that just go round and round and round. A lap, like a lap of a circuit or something. I'll see myself out.
Lapps do not call themselves Lapps anymore, it seems. Interjecting here, they never did. Germans do not call themselves Germans. Political correctness now demands that I change my habits and start calling...
What the fuck are you talking? Germans don't call themselves Germans. When did this happen? Are there any Germans in chat who can confirm this? Because I've seen loads of Germans that call themselves German. Like, basically all Germans do. The fuck are you talking about?
Calling the Lapps Sami. Political correctness is inconsistent, however, and allows me to call Germans Germans. It's not the best source, but I don't have a source specifically on the term Lapps, so I'm quoting the Norwegian Online Encyclopedia's article on the term.
Unless he means Germans don't call themselves German in German, in which case they call themselves Deutsch, right? But I don't think that's what he means, because he hasn't said anything like that. The fuck is he talking about?
This is authored by senior researcher Mikkel Berg Nordlia from the Oslo Met University and linguist Asbjørn Nesheim of the University of Oslo. Translation mine. Quote, Lapps is an outdated term for the Sami, which was used by non-Sami. Because of...
So this was put onto them, in the same way that fucking Eskimo was put onto them. Or, oh, what's the other one? The, fuck's sake. The, oh, there's a Native American Confederation that there was an exonym placed on, and I can't fucking remember what they were called. And it means something like people who drink blood or some dumb shit like that, and they never used it for themselves. It just doesn't matter. Anyway, just because you call them something doesn't mean they ever called themselves that.
Societal racism towards the Sami in the 1800s, the reigning term for the people gained a negative connotation.
Iroquois, thank you. Yes, the Iroquois didn't ever call themselves fucking Iroquois.
Patient. In Norway in the 1930s, the term Lapp was officially replaced by the Sami's own word for themselves, and following the Russian Revolution, the same occurred in the Soviet Union. Later it happened in Finland and Sweden too. This was a term used by the state towards a repressed indigenous minority, not a term they use themselves. It's taken on the connotations of an ethnic or racial slur, especially when utilized by people insisting on this word that hasn't seen official use in almost a century. The Sami understandably do not like it when you say, I prefer to use a different word to describe you, when that term coincidentally was also used by the people who carried out an ethnic cleansing campaign against your ancestors, and used the term to otherize you. He conflates a lot of different things, like how the BBC pronounces Kabul or how people call it Germany and not Deutschland, none of which are ethnic slurs. Quoting Lindy Bay,
to be fair, I do use the term German as an ethnic slur, just so everyone knows. Same with French.
I am told that these days the Laps have started to get shirty about whether people say Lap or Sami. This is an insane thing to say about someone not liking a slur, by the way. Quoting further, this is a case of the small group trying to get power.
Apparently African Americans get a bit shirty about people using the N-word with a hard R. I don't like it. They're so touchy, aren't they? Oh, crazy talk.
Of the larger by claiming some degree of oppression and insisting that the larger changes its habits as some sort of pointless and ultimately denigrating concession. It sounds to me like he's saying that Scandinavia is like a Sami-occupied government. His point here is to say that the Sami are denigrating themselves by
the Sami-occupied government. Are we about to go SQ on this shit? Are we going to have to answer the Sami question? Is that where he's going with this? I suppose Sami organised. It's not. It's the SOG. He's annoyed at the SOG machine.
Basically being childish and not being able to tough it out, I guess. It's incredibly pathetic and funny that he views this as the Sami oppressing him. He also says, quote, "A word that simply describes you is only insulting to you if the person you are is bad. If you are bad, then surely you deserve to be insulted. And I would rather that you become good than merely change your name. Lindy Beige, I'm going to call you an idiot for this take. You're going to take exception to that, and you're probably going to get offended by me calling you one because you don't believe you are one." Mind you, this entire post happened because a Swede dared to correct him on a term that hasn't been officially...
A massive Swede W. There we go. Which is ironic, because in their own language, they don't even use a W. It's Sverish. Embarrassing.
Use in Norway, at least, for close to a century. Now, when I see someone launch down a tirade like this, I usually expect them to eventually say why they should be allowed to say the N-word. Luckily, he doesn't do this.
Basically,
but
yes.
He gets really close.
I promise you there's no pre-watch. I'm not reading this out loud. Let's have a look. The word... Oh, okay. Ooh, okay. The word that is the back end of the... You know the country Montenegro, right? You know the back bit of... The last bit of that word... If that was on its own, is seldom used these days, despite it being a useful, accurate, and unambiguous one, which names a type of people. Accurate? Okay. If someone tells you that you should not use the word, then they are more powerfully than anyone else, suggesting that there is something shameful about what the fuck is... Whoa. That word is there about being that. Brilliant. I can understand the editorial choice made by Freda in not reading this out loud, and I somewhat regret my lack of foresight in agreeing with that editorial choice before I decided to read out one of the most ludicrous... Honestly, he's put himself back in the discussion of who's more right-wing, because I don't think I've ever heard Metatron, even at his most ludicrous, go back into like ancient... Well, not ancient, but like old school anthropology, like... There are 4 types of people. There's the Caucasoid, the Australanoid, the Asiatic, you know, one of those sorts of things. I don't think I've ever seen him do that. Whereas Lindy Beige has unironically just done that. Oh boy. Unless he's referring to a black robot. Because there's nothing shameful about being a black robot. But I don't think that is what he's referring to. This is a 57-year-old man.
Now, I really don't want to read this part. Not because I'm scared of saying any of these words in context. The sentence just sounds so fucking bad, I don't want a recording of me saying it out there. Now, I'm not even talking about this term in specific, but in a general sense, it's actually the opposite of what he's saying here. There's something shameful about letting someone refer to you by a term that's intended to assert their inherent superiority over you in racial terms and to belittle you. It doesn't matter if you know they're wrong, because if enough people treat you like this, then they've made you their lesser. This is not how you treat an equal, or treat someone with respect. Lindy Beige spends a great deal of time talking about how getting offended by this sort of stuff means that you're childlike and in need of coddling, not seeing the irony of saying this in a 19-paragraph essay spurred by a Swede simply advising him to not use an offensive term that's outdated by close to a century. You're the one who seems in need of coddling, Lloyd. Moving on from that, he also has an essay on women's role in society. Lindy
Oh no. Oh boy.
Believes that a woman should be in the home and not the workplace. I think he best sums up how he wants to express his view by the following quote. My feeling is that people should act in whatever way is more likely to make them happy. Coercion tends to prevent happiness, and freedom tends to promote it. I do not think that a woman's place should be forced on her. I think that women should be free. I also think that if they were truly free to pick the path that would, for them, lead to the greatest contentment, that many more of them would end up not going to work. Personally, I think the same applies to men, that both would prefer not to spend half their waking days in service of enriching the owner of their workplace. Lindy Beige here instead highlights what he calls instinctual differences between men and women that just so happen to correspond to his...
If he uses the phrase sexual dimorphism, I'm actually gonna fucking finger myself.
Worldview. These are differences in things that cause fulfillment for men and women, and he says that women would be better served to get money from a man than having to labor at a job and in the home, and so on. The text is full of presuppositions and...
Exactly, where would we be without men like Lindy Beige working hard at going to museums and slagging off fucking tanks? He's such an integral cog in the machine, isn't he? Wonderful.
Of how things are and how they seemingly have to be. Quote, it is commonly remarked that men do not like to marry women who earn more than they do. Society at large does not respect the kept man, given that this stems...
Yeah, I mean, some men do have tiny dicks. Yeah, what do you want from me?
From deep-rooted instinct, it is incredibly unlikely that this will change in the near future. We could try and educate people to respect kept men, and kept men to be happy being kept, but this would be going against the grain of human nature. Surely it is much better to go with the grain of human nature. He conflates much of what he observes with so-called human nature. Humans are social animals.
Why is it better to do that? Can you explain that?
All social organizations who create are...
Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting we just go against it either. But, like, he's just taking it as read. Oh, no, we should just go with human nature. Why? Why should we go with human nature? Why is that a better way of doing anything? Also, what is human nature? I'm guessing it's whatever you think is right. Which, ironically, isn't necessarily the nature of lots of other people.
Are a product of human nature, because constructing complex social organizations are an inherent part of us as a species. This could be the family, the village, the nation-state, the trade union, and even capitalism. All of it is a product of human nature. It's in our nature to construct complex social organizations, and to sometimes...
Okay, but why does that have to mean that women are indoors? Why does it have to be a nuclear family? Why does it have to be one man and one woman? These haven't always been the case. They aren't always the case now.
Replace those with ones that better suit us. He talks about how unaffordable housing is and how the mobilization of a greater number of the population into the workforce isn't necessarily to the benefit of women or men. That competition between these social categories isn't helping either. Quote, governments could not simply intervene and lower the price of housing. Attempts to force people to sell...
Yes, they could. And they do.
Things for less than they could get them for always fail one way or another. Something is only ever worth what someone else is prepared to pay for it. It could be that men have ended up in a world where male virtues are criticized in all but the successful few, and in which they're...
Again, it's so stupid. Capitalists, A, don't understand capitalism, and B, seem to think that capitalism, A, has existed forever, and B, is an entirely natural and not forced or coerced thing. You know, for the vast majority of human history, Lindy Beige, people didn't live this way. This wasn't human nature at all. In fact, the idea of ownership of land or property or houses or whatever would have been anathema to actually the vast majority of humans throughout history. This wasn't a thing that existed until pretty recently, actually. Just saying.
Their male instincts cause them to pursue lives that will bring them little pleasure. Meanwhile, women cannot feel respected without independence, but cannot get enough money without dependence on a man who might be gone tomorrow, so they still have to go out and get jobs. He ends with, quote, "There must be a better way." His problem is that
communism.
That his vision for how to improve things is constrained to his narrow conservative worldview. Emancipation from all these things that weigh on our lives and force us into molds we don't feel happy in is going to require rethinking a great many things. He brings up how many of the jobs that await women aren't fulfilling careers but just simply jobs, like scanning groceries behind a register and such.
Okay, but why is it okay then for men to do that? Like, are you suggesting women are inherently superior, and so they shouldn't be put to the boring, soulless task of ringing up groceries, whereas men should have to do that? Why? Why is that a thing?
This isn't the reality of women he's describing. He's describing the reality of workers. If you're watching this video, you're likely either a worker or you'll become one very soon. You'll be competing.
Nah, I'm a streamer, that's much worse.
Competing for jobs against fellow workers, to the benefit of the owners of the workplaces, who are looking for whoever will do the job for the lowest wage, because the higher your wage, the lower their profit margin. You will spend a great deal of your waking life maximizing that profit margin. There must be a better way.
Warhammer have been getting more and more corrupted by the woke mind virus. Abraham had more than one wife.
Oh, here we go. Fuck me. The woke mind virus.
Yet they were shown in visions as standing on the right hand of God in an exalted state, so clearly there's a mechanic.
Also, I apologise in advance for the Australianness you're about to be exposed to.
Or exception which permits someone to have more than one wife.
I learned of Shadiversity through a video called Names and Terms of a Medieval Castle's Parts that I saw in 2016. At the time, I thought it was reasonably informative. It's kind of like an illustrated list, like one of those visual guides you get as a kid with cross-sections in it. This is the kind of content he used to make. He still makes seemingly innocent content where he and his buddy play around with swords or pop culture props. However, the majority of his output, in terms of quantity at least, is on a channel called Night's Watch, started in 2020. This is your typical talking to the camera, low effort, right-wing opinion channel, covering stuff like Twitter takes and the Amazon Lord of the Rings show. That channel will be the majority of my focus. Shad is a practicing Mormon, hence his defense of having multiple wives. He's very serious about his somewhat fundamentalist Christian beliefs, which logically may lead to a more conservative world.
No. He's Mormon. Mormons are not Christians. I'm not having this, okay? Mormonism is its own separate thing. It is a splinter group. It is not Christian. They took a pre-existing religious belief, tacked a new set of bullshit that was made up in a much more recent era, an epoch, added that to the mythos and created a new separate thing. Okay? In the same way that Christians did with Judaism. What is Christianity but taking pre-existing religious...
Get the fuck, they came not play me all these mutants. Get the fuck.
Hello there, Helena, from the Helena channel. How are you? You know who the fuck I am. Hit the follow button. Hit the follow button.
Victory is ours!
I'm currently explaining why Mormons aren't Christians. Anyway, what did Christianity do? It took a pre-existing religious tradition and added a new, smaller bit at the end that was full of shit from a much more then modern
Ladies and gentlemen,
place, right?
We got him! Victory is ours!
Which is exactly what Mormons did to Christianity. So, if Mormons are Christians, that means Christians are Jewish. And I don't think either Jewish or Christian people would be okay with that descriptor.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him! Victory is ours!
So, like, do you know what I mean? Like, and I mean, Islam is both Christian and Muslim a bit. Does that make sense? Now, ultimately, I don't really give a fuck if Mormons want to call themselves Christian. Like, it doesn't fucking butter my chaps in any way whatsoever. I'm not a religious man in the slightest. I am very much an atheist. I couldn't give two fucks what people describe themselves as. But just in a practical sense, they're not Christians. They just aren't. Anyway. Hello there, everybody. Thank you to all of the new people. Welcome in. Everyone go and follow No Justice MTG. She's fucking awesome. But you already know all that. Anyway, we're currently watching a really weird thing. We did all of the sort of hardcore political shite at the beginning, by which I mean we watched the James O'Brien bit and I ripped him apart because he's a fucking melter. Which, if you wanted to, you can scroll back and watch that, or come back another time or something. Hello there, Celtic Delta. You should hit the follow button. It's free. Anyway, and we're watching a thing about medievalist historians on YouTube being right-wing fucking twats. So stick around for that, maybe.
Ladies and gentlemen,
whereas Lindybeige seems to mostly have his own homegrown, curmudgeonly conservative gripes with society, Shad seems to be wholly immersed in the culture war.
Already weird things are happening over the years. There was one thing where they're trying to say it's for everyone while actually excluding anyone who politically disagreed with them.
Yeah. What he's referencing here is, I believe, a Norwegian YouTuber formerly known as Art Warhammer getting ordered by Games Workshop to remove the term.
Oh, fucking Arch Warhammer. Who remembers that fucking slag? Jesus Christ. He was a fucking wrong'un.
Warhammer from his name because he was an out and about Nazi.
Yeah.
Initially it was just Art Warhammer because I figured, like, okay, I'm gonna do Warhammer.
And it didn't he used to speak, like, in his videos, he used to speak like a kind of weird posh English guy. He sounded, you know what he reminded me of sometimes in his videos when he'd speak in that kind of weird way? He reminded me of the guy from the Monster Mash. I was working in the crypt late one night. Like, he talked like that. They did the Monster Mash.
So it makes sense to mention that in the title of the channel. Absolutely.
Why did you
Games Workshop's lawyers disagreed.
I'll cite a compiled list which itself has links to his videos. Arch's channel was basically him reading fandom wiki pages in a fake British accent that made it sound like he owned colonies in the West Indies, while calling goblins house N-words. When Warhammer took
there you
action
go.
against Arch, they also released a statement which is what
He did the fash. He did the monster fash.
Chad is referencing here. I'll read the statement to you. Warhammer is for everyone. One of the great powers of our hobby is its ability to bring people together in common cause, to build bonds and friendships across divides. We believe in and support a community united by shared values of mutual kindness and respect. Our fantasy settings are grim and dark, but that is not a reflection of who we are or how we feel the real world should be. We will never accept nor condone any form of prejudice, hatred, or abuse in our company or in the world.
Really? Did Real Radhom do a debate with Arch Warhammer? Has anyone got a link to that? Because I'd definitely love to watch that. That sounds amazing. Firstly, everyone go and follow Real Radhom, who is based and awesome and Australian. Which just goes to show you, Australians, you don't have to be a knob, okay? You can be cool and awesome. And many of you are. Many of you are not. Just saying.
Hobby. We will continue to diversify the cast of characters we portray through miniatures, art, and storytelling so everyone can find representation and heroes they can relate to. And if you feel the same way, wherever and whoever you are, we're glad you're a part of the Warhammer community. If not, you will not be missed. Games Workshop is saying that Nazis are not welcome in the hobby. Shad is offended by this, or at the very least pretends to be in order to appeal to his Nazi or Nazi-adjacent fans. This is pretty unambiguous because Shad specifically mentions Arch Warhammer.
Yeah, not Arch Warhammer, not him, but it's for everyone, right?
Yeah. So much of this is...
Yeah, you can't tolerate, like, people who are massively intolerant. Because you drive out more people than if you just drove out the massively intolerant, who have made the decision to be intolerant. Jesus Christ. Like, you... Also, let's be honest, right? Warhammer are trying to make as much money as they can. They're a private corporation. So they want to have, you know, people from various backgrounds, not just Nazis. Because, I don't know if you noticed this, there aren't that many of them. It's not very profitable to just pander to Nazis. You have to pretend you're not pandering to Nazis. That's where the real money is.
2014 to 2016 internet coded that they even managed to name drop Sargon of Akkad.
Because
no way.
Sargon of Akkad said you can't have anything exclusionary, even when things are already represented.
Really, unironically, citing that fucking freak, that mutant.
Oh man,
this is so nuts.
For some reason, Shad is also obsessed with AI. If you've seen his Twitter, you'll know that it's pretty much all him coming to the defense of AI as, quote, tool-assisted art or something like that.
Of course he likes AI.
Victory is ours!
Of course he likes AI. He's the worst person in the world. Honestly, name me a single good person who thinks AI is good. Look, I know we shouldn't just do spite-based politics and all of that, but name me a single person that's like not getting the gulag come the revolution that likes AI. They're all wankers. Everyone who likes AI is a fucking prick. Everyone. No, don't get me wrong. Not everyone who uses AI. Okay? I'm sure there are some people, 255 and his amusing memes, etc. But like, literally, fucking Elon Musk and fucking Shad and all these people, just the worst human beings in the world, love it. Was there a stream tonight? What? Hang on, what the fuck? Is No Justice in the chat? I didn't see them. I don't know. Anyway.
I don't really have a dog in this race, beyond the fact that I think AI art looks like dog shit. He's really up his own ass about it, though, and berates artists about how AI art is better. For example...
Oh, hello, YouTube people, by the way. You can hit the follow button too. Oh, the subscribe button, because it's free on YouTube.
He's saying Studio Ghibli's art style is, quote, plain and, quote, uninspired. This stuff is very personal to him, as evidenced by this part of his, quote, love letter to AI video, which sits squarely...
Okay, she looks kind of like a child, though, right? Like, he's doing kind of... He's pretty nonce-coded, let's be honest.
On the intersection between sweet and kinda weird, I think.
I had a big crush on Supergirl growing up, and have a lot of nostalgic connection for this character, and what I love to do is to depict my wife as Supergirl, because that's who she is. She is my Supergirl.
I don't know what...
Right. Okay. I mean... Don't get me wrong, look, me and Christy, we did our show at the weekend about, like, kink and stuff, but you don't need to do your weird my wife is Supergirl kink reveal to everybody. Like, you didn't need to go to that place. You know, most of the people that subscribe to you were because you did shows about, like, oh, look at these cool swords and stuff, like, oh, history's cool, and now you're just being really, like, it's not technically pedophilia, it's a hepophilia. You know what I mean? You're being that guy, and it's gross.
What to say about this stuff, but I thought it bears mentioning since a lot of people have very strong opinions on the use of this technology for so-called art, and it seems to be a pretty big part of who he is right now. Shad is a big fantasy nerd. I am too. I've been playing D&D since about 2012 with some of the same people that entire time. I read...
No, that's fair, 255. I appreciate that.
...fantasy books growing up, and when I've traveled recently, I've been reading Ursula Le Guin's books of Earthsea. Shad did what a lot of fantasy nerds who also become YouTubers, gain an audience, and with it an ego do. He became an author. His Universal book series is called Chronicles of Everfall, and his first book is called Shadow of the Conqueror. It is a...
Oh, God. There's bound to be... I'm not going to bother reading it, because there's only so much will to live I can lose. But, how much you want to bet there's, like, a self-insert of, like... The person he writes himself in as is, like, the Chad hero of the story. Who wants to bet?
A world of floating islands. The story takes place after the big fantasy villain was deposed by the good guys. The main character is this deposed fantasy villain. For some reason that is apparently never revealed, the deposed villain eventually feels remorse for his actions, and the setting's analogy to God then gives him a shot at redemption, transforming him into a 17-year-old version of himself for some reason.
Oh, he even had to nonce himself up. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Gladly read an entire book on history for a video, but I refuse to read a YouTuber's first fantasy novel, so instead I'm going to read you some choice reviews. Before I do though, I need to give a quick content warning. Apparently the book contains copious mentions of sexual assault and some of it being against minors, so I will be using words...
Oh, of course it fucking... Oh, this guy... Honestly, Australian police, search this man's fucking hard drive, for the love of God. There's no way this guy isn't, like, seriously... that guy. Oh, fucking Christ. This guy's a nonce. Let's be honest. This guy is fully noncing up. Fucking hell. Oh, Jesus Christ. I do hope that, like, the restraining order against him at every local school is, like, airtight. You know.
that some might find unpleasant. Quote, this is a
you can do 255, yeah.
difficult review to write. I'm biased to like the author based off of his YouTube personality / channel. Because of that I want to like this novel, however it is rough for one minor and one major reason. So the minor reason
yeah, I'm sure there is a minor reason.
Is that the book needs editing. Quote, as is, the novel is very often expository, dumping mechanics, systems, and seemingly logic asides all the time. The tone of the written prose is fluctuating wildly, with supposedly heart-wrenching monologue from a character in one line and utterly neutral side on some tangent to the next line. For example, quote, blood was easy to wipe off because it's mostly water. What?
Is that how it works? Okay. Blood was easy to wipe off what exactly? Oh my god. Oh, it's worse than I thought it was going to be.
The biggest issue, however, that keeps me from rating this novel higher is the novel's constant obsession with sex and rape. The main character's
honestly, search his fucking his hard drive immediately. There's no... you know what? I'm getting the impression from him. Search his back garden. Dig up his fucking patio. You will find shit.
Largely defined by it. Almost all the female characters with more than one line dedicated to them are either trusty home-sitting wives, quoting, with breasts like melons, religiously obsessed...
What do you mean? Like they taste like honeydew? What do you mean? What do you mean they like melons? Jesus fucking Christ. Wow, this is honestly, you know what? I think I might need to read this book. I think we found our War Corps 2 Electric Boogaloo. We need to read this man's books because they look, I mean, with lines like with breasts like melons and it's okay, blood wipes off because it's mostly water and that. It's like Shakespeare never left us, you know?
obsessed with cooking for their men and sexing with their men, or they're absolutely and utterly defined by having been raped and or kept for sex trafficking. And okay, if this had been handled with care, okay, but the way these events are treated, like offhand mentions with no apparent empathy from the characters or author beyond the briefest of lip service, is genuinely discomforting. From another review by Kevin Potter, now I have two large issues that almost made me drop the book and get it.
Were those two large issues like melons? Because that was already mentioned.
Refund on numerous occasions. 1. Rampant and awkward sexuality and rape. There are multiple characters completely defined by their sexual assault. 2.
You know he was writing those passages with one hand, right?
The main character. There are so many issues here, but let me condense the list to a few key points. After being with him for 18 hours, I can also say there's not one thing about him that I like, largely because every positive thing presented just rings false. At the end of the day, he's still a bastard who raped young girls and killed millions. Here's another one by Chelsea, who said she did not finish it. I love Shad's YouTube channel, and this was a promising premise, but the novel is annoyingly unpolished and objectionable. As for the unsavory elements, there are copious references to rape, ravaging, and sex trafficking, as well as bestiality. What? I didn't pre-read any of these, by the way. I just scrolled down the Goodreads review list and looked...
Also, why is this the first time we're reading about bestiality now? None of the other people meant... So there's animal fucking. And none of the other ones are like, I couldn't get past the human rape, let alone the rape of the animals. Holy shit. God, this guy's a fucking creeper. Holy fuck.
For reviews that were sizable, not 3-word shitposts, and generally started with, I love this guy's YouTube channel, but... And a final review by Hope C. I'd really give this negative stars if I could. I'm just here in an attempt to reduce the inflated score, making your protagonist a genocidal pedophilic rapist who gets away with it.
Well, yes, a self-insert. Yeah.
Becomes young and handsome and then everyone forgives. That doesn't belong in published books. It belongs in long-deleted Wattpad stories. This guy's channel is almost all tired or angry opinion videos. It's hard to tell to what degree this stuff is meant to cash in on the online right-wing outrage farms, and to which degree they're actually genuinely bothered by this stuff. Sadly,
to be fair, writing about rape and pedophilia is definitely writing to the audience that he has. Because they're all nonces. If they're into like fucking Arch Warhammer and fucking Sargon and Shad, they're definitely nonces, right? 100%. 100% pedophilic. So, like, he's writing to the audience that he's trying to reach. Which, as a writer, is seemingly the only skill he possesses, because everything else is messed up. You know.
There's also not a lot of history to criticize here. Shad seems to have moved somewhat away from that stuff and is now more or less submerged in the culture war. And, to my great misery, the only thing that I could find that was somewhat related to history and was somewhat recent was Shad sharing his thoughts on Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Yeah, so I've had an interest in this from a historical perspective, but as to the race of the character, I don't really care, honestly. I mean, there's been black...
Yeah, I think you do care.
Samurai characters, Afro Samurai is one that comes to mind. In the past, and give me a good character, I'm happy.
There've been black robots as well, as we talked about earlier.
What I find interesting is the double standard, right? And what they are doing. Usually the really woke progressive crowd cry bloody murder when you have something that's depicting a more diverse setting, like say if it was in Africa or sometimes in Asia and stuff like that, and if the protagonist is white, there's a phrase that they usually use to describe if the protagonist is white. Have you heard it before?
Is it white savior?
White savior. Yeah. They call it the white savior trope, right? And so...
Well, yeah, because often it is. So? Like, so what? See, literally, so what? Why do you care? If it's a good story, why do you give a fuck? Like, this is the thing. I don't let what somebody else thinks, be it that they're woke or anti-woke, they're right-wing, left-wing, any shit like that, right? If I enjoy a movie, a film, a TV show, a band, a song, whatever, I enjoy it. That's it. I'm not going to let someone else be like, oh, it's problematic. I can fucking tell it's problematic. I can think for myself. I don't need anyone else to tell me that. And I also sort of don't care if they do or don't tell me that. They're entitled to their viewpoint, and that's it. Like, of course. Why do they do this? Why do they get so obsessed with, oh, someone said a thing that I don't like? I don't fucking care! Why do you care?
According to their own standard, this seems a little hypocritical.
Standard.
This stuff is really dumb.
Standard. That's right, I am being racist against Australians. Because they deserve it.
There is no double standard. People love stories about a guy not from medieval Japan who
Standard.
ends up in medieval Japan. It's about the way you tell that story. A quote white savior is someone who's portrayed as superior because of whiteness or their culture or something like that. It's not just any story about a foreigner in a strange land. In fact, nobody reasonable actually minds stories of a white guy getting stranded in Japan if it's told well. Shogun by James Clavell is a classic, and it was adapted into a TV show in the 80s and a TV show very recently, and that recent one won 18 Emmys, the most any show has ever won in a single season of television. The Stranger in a Strange Land trope is beloved and works really well, especially in video games. This isn't the first time they've done this. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, if I recall, you're a Norwegian who goes to England.
They are completely driven.
We were all once Australian. That is definitely not true. You know the A t-shirts for we were all Africans? That doesn't mean we were all Australians. That's a different thing. I mean, we are all criminals, but that's just inherent sin.
By the woke ideology of diversity, equity, inclusion, or...
What the fuck are you talking? It's even more mental when an Australian does it. Like, because you're just talking to an American audience. Like, Shadiversity knows exactly who he's talking to, and it's mostly Americans. Any prick from Britain or Australia or New Zealand or wherever that talks about DEI as if that's a thing where they live, which it fucking isn't, is talking to an American audience. Like when Nigel Farage talks about, oh, the DEI, there's no such fucking thing here. It doesn't exist. That isn't a term that's ever used. And yet they're gonna get rid of all the spending on DEI. What does that mean? So you're gonna get rid of no spending then? Because that isn't a thing.
All that stuff.
DEI mentioned.
They are latching onto this, historical figure and then inflating his role.
Yes.
To a much larger degree, it seems, than he was in the past, and we know why. Some of the most disingenuous, comments are like, what, you're okay with, animus, fancy, bullcrap magic, essentially, in Assassin's Creed with stuff, but you have a problem with, this bit of unrealism? It's about suspension disbelief, okay? And what they have been consistent with, in the past games, and what they have shown respect to in terms of historicity.
In Assassin's Creed 2, the final boss fight is you fist-fighting the Pope. You don't even have to bring up the fact that he has alien
yes, fist-fighting the Pope. Let's fucking go. Especially because he's American now.
Magic powers, you're fist-fighting the Pope.
No more tricks. No more ancient artifacts. No more weapons.
Well, it's not just the Pope, it's a shiny Pope.
Let us see what you are made of, old man.
All right then.
Look, it's incredibly shiny Pope.
If that's how you want to play it.
It's all very selective outrage, and I'm not 100% sure if it's genuine, if he actually is upset about representation or people having fun with historical characters when making video game stories, or if he's just doing the grift that everyone does now.
It's worth talking about the historical aspect of this black character, because there's been back and forth, and...
But he doesn't care about it, what colour it is. He doesn't care what colour it is at all. But he's now going to explain why he cares about what colour it is.
Some misunderstandings on both sides, I've found. Metatron has a great video on it. I would just basically suggest looking at, the Metatron video.
And we've come full circle. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do a lot of reading for this one, or a lot of history at all. It turns out these guys I used to watch for history don't really do
It was
much.
Rodrigo Borgia, or Borgia, I suppose. That specific pope. Was he specifically very shiny in real life? Because if not... I like historical accuracy. And as far as I'm aware, there were not many shiny popes. Quite a few dull popes, actually.
Much of that anymore, and maybe they never really did. Looking back at it, much of it was very surface level stuff. Some of them just talking to a camera and being nerds. Sometimes insightful nerds, but most times not really.
He was shiny.
If you look
Oh,
past
cool.
all the weird stuff, my channel's not too different from theirs. I think part of the reason some of their content has fallen off and I'm growing is that they came from an older tradition of YouTubers. Back in their day, you could do whatever you wanted with zero.
You don't get enough glittery popes. That's the problem. Well, and the rampant sex abuse and cover-up of sex abuse and financial corruption and aiding and abetting the AIDS crisis through their stupid attitude towards birth control. But also the lack of glitter. So,
Zero effort, and they've kind of been stuck in that mindset. You just hit record and start talking to the camera. You're the guy everyone watches, so surely what you're saying is important enough to justify your video's existence. You're very smart and important. You've been doing this for a long time, so when it comes to history, you...
I do want a fabulous pope. I want a pope that serves looks. A pope that serves cunt. Okay? And they've already got, like, the look and stuff. They've already got like, little cute red shoes and fucking big hats and, like, purple vestments and stuff. And they don't make it work for themselves, you know? They've got a Pope-mobile. Like, they've got some fucking, you know, they've got some bling. And they don't do a lot with it.
You just go with your gut. There's no need to double check to try to improve.
Like, think of the riz they could have if they put all of that Nazi gold to use.
Be curious, learn, or anything of the sort. Metatron streams and just talks to the camera. When he makes a themed history-related video, it feels like it was written by ChatGPT. Lindy Beige at least visits a museum and shows you a cool tank, but also kinda just talks at the camera. No citations, no evidence of actually engaging with history, though he does seem knowledgeable. But who knows where that knowledge came from, or how correct it is. Shadiversity's channel started doing poorly after doing the same thing for a decade, and so to innovate, he started doing 2014-era Gamergate-style content a decade after its heyday.
Lol.
These guys are relics of their time who relied on their audience knowing less than them about history. When we actually started...
To be fair, I also rely on that, but, you know, in a different way.
...learning, we very quickly outgrew them. I hope one day you guys outgrow me as well. Thank you for watching. And I want to give a special thank you to the patrons at the $10 tier, Lucana's...
Okay, you get the idea, fuck's sake. Everyone go and check out Freda, who's pretty cool by the sounds of things. I don't know a lot about them beside that, but that video was good. Actually, you know what? I'm going to give them a cheeky little subscribe there, because they might be interesting. But I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to leave it for tonight. Oh! Because even though it's literally 12:30, I'm still sweating buckets, in all honesty. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was this was a nice one. This was a little bit of everything. We had some serious politics. We had some dumb fucking YouTube shite at the end there. I enjoyed it. Hopefully you did too. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit the follow button and come back another time when maybe we'll do something slightly different. I don't know. Who is going on YouTube? Basically fucking nobody. Brilliant. Okay, if you're on YouTube, go and serve cunt. I don't know. Who's going on Twitch? There's always someone on Twitch, I think. The problem with my YouTube is I only really subscribe to people I want to watch, but very few of the people I want to watch are people I want to raid into. So, you know, maybe I need to follow more cool people. I don't know. Who's going? The Mayor McCheese. Okay, we'll go over there. Okay. What the fuck is that on the screen? That is art. Okay. The Mayor McCheese does not accept incoming raids. Well, fucking kiss my dick. Frogan. Okay, we'll go over to Frogan. That's fine. Ugh. No, you fucking absolute twat. Frogan. Hang on. What kind of fucking type? Frogan. There we go. Jesus fucking Christ. Right. I don't know what the fuck they're up to. They're doing something? No. Anyway, I'll be back possibly tomorrow, but I might take tomorrow off because I'm going to do a thing with Curtis. I'm doing Lonely Island on Wednesday, and I haven't taken a day off in a while, so I might take tomorrow off and just go to the pub and get very drunk, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, thank you all for listening and watching. Free Palestine. No pass around.